I used to live here, and I'm part of the community center. And so they're going to talk about that tonight, so that's why.
We had a couple extra, I wanted to bring those to you.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
When I was, yeah.
It's muted. The stream is currently going, but it's muted, so there's no, there's no picture, there's no audio. The stream is live. Like that.
Yeah, I went around, made sure I wasn't the only one. I was tapping on it. Yeah, that's the first thing I thought. Mine did not. I tried that too. That's why I was waiting on you. Oh, now it's doing something.
Just throw it across the room, it works better.
I'm gonna throw it across the room. No, I'm not. I'm gonna mess around.
I mean, you know, it's all like
Yep. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, and so, and I told him this, do you need Lauren or me? Whoever else has that, you know, the community center would be looking for it, if it comes down to Roadways. It's really something that we would address at that time.
Hello, Reggie. How you doing? Yeah, I'm doing all right.
Married off a daughter this weekend.
You did what?
Married off a daughter this weekend.
Oh, well, congratulations. Need to borrow some money?
Gimme. How you doing, man?
Yeah, I did one of those. Got through it. Where was the wedding?
Cedar Grove. Grove Farm out.
Okay.
Nice little layout.
Good. Okay, yeah. You think you'll be ready, right?
Yeah, stream's already set.
It's
It's up, but it's muted and there's no picture. So
Okay.
It's just,
Okay.
So I just have to flip a switch.
Yeah.
It comes up when I do that.
All right. Sounds good. Yeah, as soon as we get everybody here. Hey, then Keith. Yeah, I got a note to vote you out. I want to make sure. Yep. We'll get you voted out and get you back in. Yeah, I think it's second public hearing. Yeah. Yeah. CZ 22. What's that?
You want me to suggest it?
I'll just bring it up. Yeah, if you want to make the motion, we'll give it a second.
Sure.
Hey, Tim. I'm doing good. Mark's not going to be here. He's traveling on vacation. Yeah. Yes. Somebody can come over here.
I kind of like this seat, though, I can see the TV.
Okay.
I like sitting next to you too, but this is the TV's
Yeah.
right here.
You didn't hear anything from Tommy, did you? Okay. Okay, all right. Go ahead and shut it down. Okay. All right, everybody ready? Agenda out here. I have to put my glasses on because I can't see. Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order the November 8th, 2021 Apex Planning Board meeting to order. If you would bow your heads for the invocation. Dear Lord, I pray that you guide us to resolve the matters presented to the board today. Grant that each of us may feel our responsibility to the town of Apex. May we be challenged to give our best and be assured of your presence with us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Please stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Diane, any items of information today? By walking up, I assume that's a yes.
Yes, good afternoon. So I would like to introduce you all formally to Jerry Patterson, who is going to be serving as our new planning board secretary. You may have noticed that you received your agenda email from her. She's worked as a planning technician in the Planning and Community Development Department since 2017. She's had a varied career since graduating from the University of Minnesota with a degree in housing. She worked for Hennepin County in Minnesota and the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency at the beginning of her career. And most recently, she's been a local realtor working in the private sector for many years. And her time as a realtor in the area has given her a different perspective on development, housing, financing, and challenges in our area. So please make Jerry feel welcome.
Welcome, Jerry.
Welcome, Jerry.
At this time, we will open up for any public comment on any non-agenda items under the public hearings today. Does anybody wish to come forth on any of those? Staff, is there any public comments, emails, or recordings? Okay. All right, with that, we'll move to consent item number 1, the minutes from the October 11th, 2021 meeting. I assume everybody's read them. Any comments, adjustments, or a motion to approve?
Make a motion to approve.
A motion from Keith. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Reggie. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. All right. Item number 1 for this is all the public hearings. Jenna is going to provide public hearing and possible motion regarding amendments to the bicycle and pedestrian system plan map of the transportation plan. Hello, Jenna.
Hi, good afternoon. Okay, so I'll be presenting for public hearing number 1, a public hearing and possible motion regarding amendments to the bicycle and pedestrian system plan map along Holt Road, Holland Road, and Friendship Road. So the purpose of these proposed amendments is to address a conflict between the Comprehensive Transportation Plan and the Bicycle and Pedestrian System Plan map. In 2018, Advance Apex, the Comprehensive Transportation Plan, and Bike Apex, the Comprehensive Bicycle Plan, were being developed at the same time. And as part of Advance Apex, a context areas map was developed, and that's shown here on the left side of the screen. And the context area map divided the town into 4 contexts: the town center, rural, suburban, and transit-oriented development. And one way in which this map is used is to guide how roadways are designed and spaced. So the 3 roadways that we're going to be focusing on today are all located within the suburban context. So we're looking at the 3 circled roadways, so Holt Road, Holland Road, and Friendship Road. And these are all located in the suburban context. And roadways that are in the suburban context are designed with a curb and gutter section. And on the bicycle and pedestrian system plan map, these 3 roadways are shown with paved shoulder. And paved shoulder is a better bicycle facility for roadways within the rural context, as roadways within the rural context are designed with a shoulder and ditch section. So roadways such as New Hill Olive Chapel Road and then Wimberley Road west of the Tobacco Trail would be more fitting to have paved shoulders as a bicycle facility. So the first roadway that we're going to, before I get into the details, so staff are proposing to remove proposed paved shoulder from these 3 roadways as it is in conflict with it being within the suburban context. The roadway design's in conflict. So the first one that we're going to look at in detail is Holt Road. So there are a variety of roadway designs along Holt Road. The first one, or the first image on top, is an older section of Holt Road. So that was designed using an older NCDOT standard with 2 through lanes and then a white line marking the edge of the travel lane, and then a space between the travel lane and the curb and gutter. And this space does not meet the town's requirements for a bike lane, as it doesn't meet the minimum 5-foot width for a roadway that with a curb section. But cyclists too do often use this as a bike lane. And then the picture on the bottom is a more recently developed section of Holt Road, which was designed in accordance with the town's standard for a 3-lane thoroughfare. And so Holt Road is designated as a 3-lane thoroughfare on the Thoroughfare and Collector Street Plan map. So it was designed with the center turn lane and then 2 through lanes and no gap between the edge of the travel lane and the curb and gutter. So it's recommended that along sections like this for cyclists to ride within the travel lane and then for drivers to pass within the center turn lane. And then this image on the bottom just shows the specifications for the cross section of Holt Road on this bottom picture. So this map shows the existing conditions along Holt Road, and staff are proposing to remove the proposed paved shoulder along Holt Road and not add an on-road bicycle facility, as there really is not an opportunity to do so. As you can see, curb and gutter has been set along most of Holt Road, as it's mostly been developed within Apex. And this is consistent with what's shown on the Town of Cary's plans, as they do not have any on-road facilities shown along their section of Holt Road of the northern part in their jurisdiction. So this map gets into more of the details of the proposed amendments along Holt Road. So staff are proposing to remove the proposed paved shoulder, but then to add side path along the south side of Holt Road between Phillips Branch Street and Hasbrook Drive. And the purpose of this proposed side path is to complete a bicycle and pedestrian facility from the North Beaver Creek Greenway along here to the White Oak Creek Greenway. So a section of the North Beaver Creek Greenway has been constructed within Charleston Village, and then another portion is in development as part of the courtyards on Holt, So with the addition of the proposed side path along the south side of Holt Road, along with the existing sidewalk along the east side of Jinx Carpenter Road in Apex, as well as the proposed bike lanes along Jinx Carpenter Road in Cary, along Jinx Carpenter Road, that would complete the bicycle and pedestrian connection from the North Beaver Creek Greenway along Holt Road and along Jinx Carpenter to the White Oak Creek Greenway. So the next 2 roads that we're looking at are Holland Road and Friendship Road. So similarly to Holt Road, Holland Road is designated as a 3-lane thoroughfare on the Thoroughfare and Collector Street Plan map, but Friendship Road is designated as a 4-lane median divided thoroughfare. But unlike Holt Road, Holland Road and Friendship, well, there has not been much development along Holland Road and Friendship Road, so that there's an opportunity to provide an on-road bicycle facility along these two roads. So staff are proposing to remove the proposed paved shoulders along Holt Road and to add bicycle lanes, as there's an opportunity to do so as development occurs.
Holland Road, not Holland Road.
Yes, Holland Road, that must have said something different, sorry. Along Holland Road and Friendship Road. And I drove out there today and there's been almost no curb has been set along these two roadways. So planning staff recommend approval of these proposed amendments, and they've been discussed with Public Works and Transportation staff, as well as Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources staff, and they recommend approval as well. So I'm here to answer any questions that you may have about the proposed amendments.
I do have a few.
Yes.
As you know, I do cycle, and I'm very familiar with that area because it's right outside my neighborhood.
Okay.
The side path you're proposing is supposed to be, on Holt Road, the side path is supposed to be for cyclists, or is that more for children?
I think both. It could serve as the people who are using the greenway and then want to get up to the White Oak Creek Greenway to complete that connection.
Honestly, I don't foresee any road cyclists
Okay.
riding the side path.
Okay.
They're gonna stay on the road.
Right.
So I don't know if that's necessarily money well spent or not, but maybe middle schoolers might use it, but no adult cyclist is gonna leave the road to go on a side path.
Right, okay. Yeah.
So kind of piggybacking what you said, the 3-lane section, you said that you prefer cyclists to actually travel with cars, so it's almost like a shared lane, and then people would pass in the suicide lane in the center, versus doing a 2-lane with a paved shoulder or not a dedicated bike lane on the outside instead of a paved shoulder because the dedicated bike lane isn't wide enough. So the preference is to actually commingle cars and bikes. Is that right?
Or depending on which section of Holt you're on. So if you're on this section, well, it's not a dedicated bicycle lane. That's what cyclists often use along the older section, like in the Charleston Village area. But if you're in the new area along Middleton, cyclists would use the travel lane and then would be passed.
That
Using
lane
that center
ends,
turn lane.
that top picture, that lane ends about 30 yards west of there because there's a turn.
Okay,
So it's really only maybe a 200-yard stretch that we have that protected lane protected. I mean,
So is there a preference though? I guess I'm just curious, is one, it would seem to me that the top one would be safer.
a little bit, but honestly, a cyclist is supposed to take the lane, and cars either ride behind them and just wait till they can clearly pass, but if there's a 3-lane road there, they just go around. Personally, I'd rather have the 3-lane road and you just go around me versus me trying to stay in that 2.5 foot.
5 to 10 years, if this road gets resurfaced, what would be the full condition for the whole length of it? What would be the?
it's shown on the transportation plan as a 3-lane thoroughfare, so with this
The
section.
bottom part, near Middleton.
But the curb has been set along most of Holt Road, so it's unlikely that it would be widened.
So the only portion that has the side path is between,
Between the courtyards on Holt
right,
and
all the way
James
down to,
Carpenter.
what's just to Hasbrook? Okay, so there's private homes on that northern side of Holt Road, so we're putting a side path on that side of the street or on the south side?
On the south side, on the Apex side,
Okay.
to give
There's
people,
also connectivity between the White Oak Greenway, and so they would, if they had to get through there, they would stay on the side path.
But today headed to that greenway, there is a protected lane that you're referring to, what the carry has.
right now,
Road cyclists still don't use
Yeah.
it because of the debris that's in that lane, and the kids ride on the sidewalk. So I'm just trying to weigh why it's a benefit.
for the side path.
Yeah,
The idea is that they would take the greenway to the side path, and then, right now, there's not a bike lane, but Carrie shows bike lanes along Jinx Carpenter Road.
So
So
they're
when
gonna
those are
widen it?
striped, excuse me,
Gary's widening that road?
or they don't have plans to widen Jinx Carpenter Road, just on, they have the existing sidewalk, and then their long-range plan shows bike lanes.
Interesting.
Might not be the road cyclists, but the trail people that.
Yeah, the trail people I get, I mean, but, all right. I'm out of questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yep.
Is it, so, in reading this, is Friendship Roads, is it going to maintain the designation of a 4-lane with median?
Yes.
Or is it, so, I guess, is it worth looking at that long term, considering that bridge is a 2-lane road that goes over US 1? And then you look at the next item on the agenda, there's gonna be an at-grade separation a half mile south of there. So you've got a 4-lane road with median that goes into a 2-lane bridge that probably won't be replaced.
And that's something that came up because Holly Springs also shows bike lanes along Friendship Road in their jurisdiction. And so we were, no like real plans, but potentially just maybe sign for people to use the road along the bridge and then get back in the bike lanes, unless that bridge were eventually to be replaced.
Okay.
So the plan for Friendship Road and, was it Holland?
Yeah.
Are they to stay paved as they are and not marked? If I understand that right?
Well, the plan would be to remove the paved shoulder and add proposed bicycle lanes. So when development occurs, the roadway would need to be designed with a cross-section to accommodate bike lanes.
Is that wider than what's there now, what's currently?
Yeah, right now it's just a 2-lane road. A little section in front of the Bella Casa has what looks like a paved shoulder, but it's for a very short segment of Holland.
I
And
should
then,
rephrase that. Is it wider than what is proposed now as far as the 4-lane? I'm just looking at as far as how much wider are we gonna go onto other people's property, because that's usable space for them too.
by adding the bike lanes, you're
Right.
asking? Well, our 4-lane median divided section includes 6-foot bike lanes on each side.
Okay.
But then this adds them to the actual map and to the bicycle and pedestrian system plan map, because right now it's shown as paved shoulder. So I think the answer to your question would be no.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions for Jenna? At this time, we'll open up for any public comments, if anybody wants to come from the public to discuss this item. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for any additional discussion or possible motion.
Jenna, was there a public hearing comment received?
There was for this one, yeah.
Oh, there was, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, just read that.
The name and the address?
Okay, so Jane Kaiser submitted this comment, and she lives at 502 Thorngate Road.
And her email was forwarded to you when it was received by us. The
Oh.
planning board, all planning board email.
Okay, I saw one, I didn't see,
Let's see her. Let's see her.
you saw hers, okay. Was it earlier, or a lot earlier?
It was submitted, well, I didn't see the forward date. It was forwarded to the planning board on November 1st, Monday.
Okay. Yeah, I must have saw that one, okay. Any further discussion? Possible motion?
Do we need to read that one into record? Okay.
I'm all for bike lanes. Just side path, I know is not going to be used by road cyclists. That's going to be used by middle schoolers or people with young kids.
But this is also for the pedestrian
Yeah.
plan, so. I
Yeah.
think-
I mean, I'm all for having more of a pedestrian walking infrastructure. So, I mean, I'm not going to knock it.
Okay.
guess that being said, I'll make a motion to approve as presented agenda.
I have a motion from Reggie to approve all 3 of the amendments. Second, any other discussion?
I have just maybe one comment. I'm really pushing that out there was working. I'm hearing what you're saying about cyclists not using it, and I'm wondering if as we're doing, we have the broader transportation plan, and this is to merge the two. I wonder if there's room for engaging the cyclist community around when we're proposing changes like this, because I hear what you're saying, and I wonder how broad that thought is. And again, I'm kind of with you on the more modes of transportation better, and there are a lot of middle schoolers that are walking that route, so it's got to be utilized. But I think that's a really valid point, and want to wonder if there's opportunities for us to engage the cycling community as we're looking towards making other changes. And with that, I'll second the
Okay.
motion.
Thanks, Tina. So a motion from Reggie and a second from Tina. Any further discussions or not? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, item number 1 passes unanimously. Item number 2, Shannon is going to present the public hearing and possible motion regarding amendments to the thoroughfare and collector street plan map of the transportation plan.
Good afternoon. Let me orient you to the vicinity of the amendments we're discussing this evening. This is New Hill Holloman Road. And this is a future extension of Richardson Road. We have Old US 1 kind of to the north and the railroad tracks to the north of the amendments we're discussing, and then US 1 to the south. So the proposed amendment is all related to this future collector street shown extending from New Hill Holloman Road over to future Richardson Road. The first part of the proposed amendment is to upgrade this facility from a minor collector street to a major collector street. So as a reminder, both collector types use 60 feet of right-of-way. Both are built with pedestrian facilities on both sides of the roadway. Major collector streets typically connect major thoroughfare to major thoroughfare, which this one would. And another key difference is major collector streets cannot be accessed directly by residential driveways unless they're existing, whereas minor collector streets can. So they're designed to carry a higher capacity of traffic. So that change is proposed because it connects to thoroughfares. Also because since we took the grade separation off of our transportation plan of the railroad at New Hill Holloman, the surrounding network is considered that much more important for emergency access and evacuation. The second part of the proposed amendment is an alignment change, and that's where the future collector street would connect to New Hill Holloman Road. So you can see this pink dashed line is what's currently shown on our plan, and then the green line is what's proposed. This is mainly to create an opportunity for a full movement intersection, as this new alignment would align across from existing Church Road. Since New Hill Holloman Road is shown as a future 4-lane median divided roadway, those opportunities for full movement will be restricted when that median is placed. And there is already a median at Briar Hill Road, which is where our current alignment is shown. In addition, the southern alignment has the advantage of reducing the number of stream crossings. Just based on our desktop data, we would have 1 stream crossing for this short section compared to 3. And then it also eliminates a crossing of the town of Cary sewer force main. So let me zoom in. Well, first, just big picture view. This is the fire station here, and this is New Hill Community Center located here. So we did reach out to the community center, since this would be most impactful to their property, to discuss and get some insight. And there is a gentleman here who will speak during the public hearing about some of their thoughts. This exhibit was created as a part of that conversation. So this shows a concept for the future Collector Street, which would come in at this orange line right across from Church Road. You can see the town of Cary force main easement, which we would not want to be on top of, and then the New Hill Community Center located here. So some of the concerns from our first conversation were proximity of the future roadway to the building. So you can see there would be 20 feet, just based on our concept, 20 feet to the edge of the right-of-way, and then 32.5 feet to the back of the roadway curb. So in between, there would be grass and a sidewalk. Other concerns were impacts to parking, which this wouldn't be built like this because the community center would need access to the road. But just if you just laid the right-of-way on top without thinking about grading and that sort of thing, that's 6 parking spaces. But our senior GIS analyst did show that there's space for mitigation of that parking loss to the south. So you can see that that's just drawn in here. And then there were also concerns about property impacts and the ability to expand the community center building in the future. So again, our GIS analyst just showed a mirror image of the building to the south and how that could work. One potential advantage is that...
The yellow, I'm sorry, that's the yellow, the mirror image?
So it's hard to see, I'm sure, on the screen, but this is the existing building that I'm attempting to circle.
Right.
And then this is just showing, yeah, just a mirror, you know, if they doubled the building, that's where it could go. One potential advantage is that the community center could have access to this Collector Street and then potentially full movement access on New Hill Holloman Road instead of trying to get out on New Hill Holloman Road and not knowing where the medians will be in the future. There are no funded plans to build this road. It's not programmed by the town or the state. It's most likely that it would be constructed as part of development in the future. Planning staff are recommending these amendments. They were also discussed with Public Works and Transportation, Police, and Fire, and they were also supportive of moving forward with these amendments. And I can try to answer any questions.
Thank you, Shannon. Any questions for Shannon?
Can you tell me one more time, you said the major collectors will not have driveways off of those, right?
Yep, so minor collectors, we allow direct access by residential driveways.
Okay.
Major collectors, we do not. If they're already there, like a portion of this,
I was looking at Bosco Road, just the existing that's there.
yeah, if they're there, then they stay, unless there's redevelopment.
Okay.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you.
This time, does anybody want to come? We'll open up the public hearing portion. And anybody wishing to speak during the public comment, make sure you sign in eventually at the sign-up sheet right there. Okay, good, thank you.
Thank you. I am Bob Kelly. I live in Pittsburgh now, but I used to live here in Olive Farm Road and ended up selling to Apex. The property is going to be Olive Farm Park. So I am also vice president of the New Hill Community Center, and that's why I'm here tonight. Paul Barth wanted to be here, but he had an activity at the community center that he had to attend to, so I am here instead. A couple of items I would like to talk to you about is one of the items in the planning board's recommendation is that you would avoid, by having this collector road, as she just described, you would avoid having to cross the force main. Well, US 64, Olive Chapel, Reagan Road, Hume Olive Road, Old US 1, and the railroad tracks all cross that force main. So we don't see the difference in having one more collector street when you've got all of those other roads, already crossing it. So kind of, what's the big deal with that? Also in the planning board's documentation or the planning group's documentation, she mentions that the change could impact some parking to the New Hill Community Center. Well, there's no need for the word could. It should be, it will impact the parking for the community center. For number one, we use the sewage line, the force main sewage line, as overflow parking. We have that gravelled off, and when our parking lot fills up, that's where the overflow parking goes. We can't do that in the future because then you would have people crossing a 4-lane road to get from the parking to the community center. So that doesn't work. Also, where they show on here the expansion for the parking lot on the south side of the building, I don't think they take advantage of the topo map, because from the top left corner of our property to the bottom right-hand corner, there's a 14-foot drop-off in grade. And that's shown on the handouts that I gave to you. And having to construct a parking area that goes down about 6 or 8 feet to get to that parking area on the south side is kind of ridiculous. That's number one. Number two, because of that grade, we don't see anywhere down there where we could put overflow parking, like we have today on the force main. Also, in addition to the parking being impacted, that area where the collector road is showing is where the children in the community use as a playground when we're having events at the community center. Because, the little kids and all are not going to sit in there and listen to the long meetings and whatever. So they use that as a playground. We also use that for activities, for outdoor activities. And the third use of that is when we constructed the building, we had that land, that area there landscaped such that we could very easily just dig footings, pour slabs, stand up walls, and now we've got a new community center. If we have to move to the south side of the building, again, there's a 14-foot drop-off there. So Apex, we would expect Apex to haul in all of that fill dirt to raise about two acres of land up, 8, 12, 14 feet. So we now have room to expand our building the same way we would have if we could use it the way it is today. But we're also missing the overflow parking, as I just said. We don't see where that goes in there. So just kind of to summarize, our children would not have anywhere to play. And in that short distance from the building to the 4-lane road, we sure do not want the children playing out there. Outdoor activities at the community center cannot be held anymore because we don't have any more level land. some of the things that we think Apex needs to consider before they approve this is what are the expenses that they're going to be facing to force us to give up that land for the road there. Because again, that land that the force main is on is ours. You know, the Westway partners just have a easement through there. And there's land on the other side of the force main between us and the firehouse that is also ours. Well, if that road is there, we have zero use for that at all. I mean, it's just, you know, it's just there, you know. It can never be used as far as we know. And again, the cost of going down that hill on the south side of the parking lot to the new parking, it's a very, very steep area there. And I mean, that is not going to be cheap to, you know, smooth out that big drop off and then put hard surface on it and then, you know, grade out the new parking. Also, sidewalks and steps will have to be built there such that people can get up that hill from parking, you know, way down there.
Mr. Kelly, we need to wrap up here.
Okay. One thing, two more very quick points, if I may. There's a 500-gallon grease trap there that Apex made us install. That is going to have to be moved to put to expand the building out to the south side. We don't know where in the world you would put that. And the major thing is, with the new road in and the new parking lot in, we have now crossed the threshold for when a storm retention pond is required. I think, if I remember correctly, we were at 0.999 acres of impermeable ground. Well, once you put that road in, we have exceeded that 1 acre. So is Apex going to build the extension pond, the stormwater extension pond? So I'm hoping that rather than approve this, you know, the planning board will take this under consideration and then decide that, you know, we need to take this back on the other side of the fire station where it was initially. And thank you for your time. Or I'm willing to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
Okay.
Is there anybody else from the public who wants to come forth for any comments? If not, I'll close the public hearing section and bring it back to the board for discussion. I guess maybe a question for Shannon, you know, with all that, is it a possibility to bring that Collector Street farther south? I know you're trying to line it up to Church Street but is there, I know we got the on and off ramps, but it seems like, I don't know if there's any possibility to have it farther south.
Yeah, so, I mean, can I clarify one thing
Yeah.
first? This is for Mr. Kelly. So just for information, the roadway that would be proposed here would be just 2 lanes, 1 in each direction, not a 4-lane road. So just wanted to make sure that's understood. As far as moving it further south, I think the main concern with trying to do that would be getting too close to the interchange, as you noted, Mr. Marks. And the community center has quite a large piece of property. So, you know, we have to move it quite a bit south to get off their property entirely. I believe the next property there is Duke Energy property. But the main thing is really the proximity to the interchange. Russell, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
I think that sums it
That
up.
covers it,
That's
yeah.
where we would go. If there wasn't a community center there, that's where we would recommend it.
Right.
So
Yeah.
make sure that would be difficult.
Sarah, can you give an idea of how much further south, how much further south and what that would look like? you give us an idea on the map?
Did you ask me, Shannon, or Russell? Sorry.
I'm sorry. Shannon, I'm sorry. I meant, yes, Shannon, if you could.
So where we're showing it is where we would recommend it.
I'm sorry. If it were to be further south, so the question was, could we move it further south? And I'm wondering what that would look like to be put further south.
So I have not analyzed a location further south, because this is the spacing that we would recommend for that full movement intersection that we're suggesting is important in this location.
How about to consider a church road changing, it looks like there's one lot that's affected there. If there could be a realignment where you just realign Church Road to go up instead of taking where the community center is and then go closer to where the fire station is now. So basically just making a realignment of, just pushing the road north so it doesn't affect the community center, and then realign Church Road. It looks like Church Road right now, that may be, is that a gravel road or no?
So I know portions of Church Road are part of developments that's already been approved and under construction. I believe Church Road may be improved up to New Hill Holloman. Do you remember offhand?
It's gonna stay as is
As
for
is.
now, but as development occurs, the understanding is it'd be approved. I don't know that we have any anticipated development plans that would realign the existing state road.
And you're saying that any realignment that would be, well, and maybe you're not saying this, I need to understand it. Is there a potential to realign Church Road further south?
If we realign Church Road, so I'd be very hesitant to go into details about realigning Church Road without taking the time to really analyze that. We have, as we did with this project, there's many things to consider with streams, property impacts. We'd be impacting different property at that point. There's development underway. So I can't tell you right here whether that would work well or not.
And I guess the other concern to add would be that if you, and in that case, it might not be a realignment of Church Road, it might be another road, and keep Church Road where it is, in which case that would go maybe to a right in, right out, so it could affect access for other property owners. There's a lot of moving parts there. I mean, you could do all kinds of things in the future, long term, if you dreamed long enough. I mean, you could do a 4-lane road, you could do super street type scenario with like restricted movements and other things. What we're going for here is what in our mind is the simplest approach, understanding that there are certainly complications on site for the community center which would have to be mitigated if this project moved forward, either by development or by the town. But it sounds like there's obviously a lot of legitimate concerns, and I don't know if it's something that we need to take back to the drawing board and discuss further or not.
So there is, by the fire station, if you came north of the fire station, there's Briar Hill Road that you could have a connection.
It's an existing right in, right out up there. It's the way that connection was made.
Is there a median at that point?
Yeah, so the issue is if Church Road was an existing road left open as full movement. Briar Hill was proposed as right in, right out because of the close proximity. You could certainly flip those and make Briar Hill the full movement, Church Road the right in, right out, but then it'd be affecting an existing state road. And that's not the way it was set up. The left turn lane was provided there at Church Road for a full movement intersection, so there'd be significant improvements to the north. So regardless of which way we go, I mean, there's no, obviously there's concerns about on-site issues here, but if you start talking about other scenarios, there's other improvements that are involved, other restrictions or changes to existing access and widening on the road that would be included. So there's not an easy answer the other way, if that's understandable.
So given, Russell, I want to build off of what you said. I wonder if it's time to maybe go back to the drawing board. I mean, given that we have construction underway, given that this is a proposed realignment based on the transportation plans and that there's no future construction in mind at the moment, I wonder if it is possible to come back with more scenarios to to see what other impacts there are, and I apologize for putting you on the spot, Shannon, because I do realize you can't just without what that is gonna look like, but I do wonder if, having a better understanding of what movements, the various roads would be, understanding that this is much more complex than, just saying we're gonna move it a little south or a little north. But I wonder if having a better grasp of what options are and what are the least case scenario, the least best worst scenarios, because we're going to affect, we may be able to move it to not affect the community center, but we may be affecting someone else and, someone else's property. And so I just wonder if I would love to, because we're not in the middle of needing to know right now, I would love to know what other options are out there.
And would it be helpful if Connector Street came closer to the fire department and had access to the fire department on that street? Would the fire department like that as another, where they could come right out of their fire station onto that street to head towards Richardson Road?
I mean, yeah, typically they want direct access to the major thoroughfare, and just being an emergency service center, that's viewed a little bit differently than typical sites, so we allow more driveway flexibility for those type sites. Certainly, if you talk about moving it north, then the question comes in, for long-term, what happens to Church Road? Is that eventually going to become a right in, right out? And then how do you serve that? So that may be an option if you moved it north, if there was space north between Briar Hill and Church Road, and then Church Road became right in, right out long-term. But then we have to figure out, where is that alignment going? How is it crossing the force main, and what kind of complications are there with that? So there's a lot of moving parts to consider.
I guess back to Mr. Kelly's comment, it sounds like other streets are already going over top of the force main. Is that a true statement?
So we cross utilities with roadways. That's certainly true. It's not always easy. We cross gas pipelines too. That's not always easy. We typically try to avoid those crossings because it's the depending on the alignment of the vertical and horizontal alignment of the roadway. There are certainly things you have to consider when doing that. So, but yes, it's certainly it's certainly feasible to cross the force main. The question is where and what it takes to cross it. So.
Question on Mr. Kelly's point with retention ponds. How does that come into play with this road being put in?
I mean, I can't speak to the impervious calculation. I mean, I would venture a guess that the existing site was developed based on the calculation that he noted, and any additional impervious on the site would trigger that. I can't speak for our Water Resources Department as if someone proposed construction of the road, would that in effect trigger a requirement, in which case whoever's building the road would be responsible for that if the road is what's triggering that. So whether it's another developer or whether it's the town doing it, we would have to mitigate that impact. Just like if they expanded the site today with additional impervious, then I would venture a guess that they would have to mitigate that impact as well.
Okay. Thank you.
And I did just want to, in addition to what Russell mentioned about the fire department typically wanting access to the thoroughfare, these were reviewed with the fire chief. And in addition to looking for the upgrade to the major collector street, the full movement access is, advantageous from emergency access perspective. So.
Any further discussion? Any other questions for Shannon? I kind of agree with you. I'd like to maybe look at some other options and just, when I first looked at it, I didn't realize it was actually coming over the land of the community center, and I'm not, without looking at other options and potential, it'd be nice to see what else we could do without impacting an existing structure and landowner.
And I feel like at the moment we have a, while not ideal, and while it doesn't do the alignment, we do have we have a road that is constructed, so it's not a road that's proposed.
Right, and it could be a long time, so I think we do have, it's not like we can look at this and maybe come up with a different solution. But
Could I make one clarifying comment? So this proposed alignment would not impact their existing structure.
Right.
It would impact parking, but just wanted to
Yeah,
clarify that.
understood, but it is their land that we would be putting the street over top
Right.
of. Yeah.
So I do have a question about who, like, in what scenario, if this property owner were impacted, who pays for that impact and who compensates the property owner for that impact? Like, obviously, if you're displacing parking, there has to be new parking. Would it be a developer or would it be like a public-private park? In what scenario is that road connection made?
So it depends on what happens with development. If it's a connection that a developer needs for their project and they can negotiate with the property owner that they need, in this case, the community center. They could negotiate with the property owner to purchase the right-of-way that they need to build the road. Initially, when we looked at that, we saw that as, staff saw that as a potential advantage because that's money going to the community center. So they would work with them on just compensation for their parking loss, their property, and any other mitigation, such as the points that were brought up at that time. If it's a connection that the town decided to move forward because we see that as an important connection, then we would be negotiating with the property owner and determining what mitigation is needed and what payments. Typically, collector streets aren't built by the town, not typically, but there are cases where a connection is important and there could be some type of partnership. But a lot of the issues that were brought up and concerns are things we would typically address at that time as part of design and property negotiation.
Do you know off the top of your head, as the major collector classification, does that change the speed limit and or vertical design criteria?
Remind me.
Our major collector standard is a 35 mile per hour design versus a minor collector standard is a 25 mile per hour design. So it does change. However, there have been some developments that have moved forward in the past where they've done urban type designs for major collectors. So they basically replaced like an on-street parking type alternative, median divided and other things. Like if you look out the window here going through Villages of Apex, Grand Central Station is actually a major collector, but it's designed with a median with on-street parking at 25 mile per hour intended design and parking. However, the alignment's pretty flat and pretty straight, so if you talked about, the actual alignment of the road, it's probably well above 25 miles per hour, but just the context for the parking and median is that. But a road like this, the intent would be just a 2-lane road, as Shannon mentioned, 35-foot back-to-back, so it would be typically based on a 35 mile per hour design and posting.
That's helpful. I listened to what Mr. Chairman said and some of the other board members. I think the options are good to hear about. Just looking at it in IMAPs, though, if you came in through the Duke property, it falls off like 50 feet right down south of this community center. And if you have to stub a road in, you're going to be building a bridge over that wetland area. Environmental impact aside, the cost of that seems pretty astronomical. So, and putting it at the intersection where we have it shown on the proposed Church Street intersection makes the most pragmatic sense, but short of having other alternatives known, that would be conjecture. It just looks expensive to go south, a lot more expensive. Yeah, I'm with you guys. I think having just full understanding of those potential implications would be helpful.
And I sort of lastly, building off of your question, I wonder, as proposed, if we're setting it up for a negotiation between a potential developer and the New Hope property, is that correct? Is that as proposed?
So this isn't a unique situation. So as all of our planned roadways cross existing private property, if it was built by a developer that didn't own that property and they needed the connection, they would move forward with those agreements and negotiations. If it was the town that moved forward to build the roadway, we would move forward with the negotiations.
But that be before the application was submitted for whatever the plan would be?
I don't know that it's before the application is submitted if it's not part of their project, but I believe they'd need approvals to show that they could actually make that connection before they could ever go to construction. Thank you.
Helpful context, thank you.
And just do want to remind you, as you're getting potentially closer to motions, that we have two distinct possible motions, the major collector and the alignment.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just, I'm not putting words in anybody, but I think a potential motion would be, oh, Diane, no.
Yeah, so we agree that we want to go back and study it. I don't think we should be continuing it because technically you don't have 30 days to your next meeting. So I think that the consideration of the minor collector to major collector could be voted on tonight, but we'd like to withdraw the discussion of the location until we can go back and study it. And we'll just re-advertise it both for planning board and council in a few months when we're ready to do that.
Okay, that's what I was thinking, that we could approve the major collector and then just, because we already have a connection on there, it's just we were going to remove that, so. If everybody agrees with that, we just need that motion, and
Yeah.
So the ask is to not consider the realignment, just the minor to major.
Yeah.
Okay.
do we need to just deny that, or do we just say it's going to be the?
No, we've withdrawn it.
It's been withdrawn, okay. All right, so all we really need is a motion to approve to make that a major collector. And I would think that would be, I would like that as a major collector. I don't think we want subdivisions
Yeah.
coming in with a lot of
No, we
sidewalk
don't.
and driveway connections.
And we know the infrastructure is lacking in that part of town as
Yeah.
it is now, so I'd make the motion to have this be a major collector and address the other portions at another time.
Okay, so I have a motion from Reggie to approve as a major collector. Do I have a second? I have a second from Tina. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So we pass it with just the major collector portion. Thank you, Shannon. Item number 3, Lauren, public hearing and possible motion regarding rezoning case 21CZ21, the Beauregard Place at Whittington.
Yes, good evening, everyone.
Hello.
So this is rezoning case 21CZ21, Beauregard Place at Weddington. So the proposed subject property is a total of 3.30 acres and is located in the general northwest ETJ, south of Green Level West Road, and east of the American Tobacco Trail, and at the end of Beauregard Place, west of Weddington. The property is currently vacant and heavily wooded. The property is currently zoned rural residential, and the adjacent zonings are to the north, rural residential, east and south, planned unit development conditional zoning associated with the Weddington subdivision, and the west is the conservation buffer, which is the American Tobacco Trail. The applicant is proposing to rezone the property to low-density residential conditional zoning. The 2045 land use map identifies this as low-density residential, and the proposed rezoning to low-density conditional zoning is consistent with that land use classification. So the applicant conducted a neighborhood meeting on August 18th, 2021, and a copy of the neighborhood report is in your packet. A full list of the proposed uses and zoning conditions can be found on page 2 of the staff report. The applicant is proposing single-family, accessory apartment, utility minor, park active, and park passive. And besides the residential architectural conditions that we typically see, I also wanted to point out a few zoning conditions. Zoning condition number 1 reads that the development shall have a maximum of 5 single-family residential lots. Zoning condition number 6 there shall be a 15-foot type A buffer along the eastern property line, property from Beauregard Place north to the property boundary. Zoning condition number 9, the developer shall provide a donation to the Town of Apex Affordable Housing Fund in the amount of $500 per residential lot payable at the time of final plat. The proposed rezoning would allow for additional lots that would be served by the existing streets in the Weddington subdivision. The Council Smith Tracts, Weddington, TIA assumed 200 single-family units for the 2021 build-out. 190 units were approved in the construction plans, 10 less than the TIA assumed. Based on this, the TIA accounts for up to 10 additional units proposed for connection to Weddington internal streets. Transportation engineering staff have stated that the construction of the homes within the next couple years would have a minimum impact on traffic, not resulting in any additional off-site recommendations. The Environmental Advisory Board held a pre-application meeting for this rezoning on July 15, 2021. The zoning conditions suggested by the EAB are listed on page 3 of the staff report, along with the applicant's response to each condition. A letter of impact from Wake County Public School System was received for this rezoning and is included in the staff report packet. Wake County Public School System indicates that schools at elementary and middle school grade levels within the current assignment area for the proposed rezoning development are anticipated to have insufficient capacity for future students, transportation to schools outside of the current assignment. School expansion or construction within the next 5 years is not anticipated to address concerns. Also, according to Wake County Public School System, the Beauregard site falls into an area that is still significantly crowded. However, the size of the area, which is 5 proposed units, does not figure to impact the area more than it already has been. Approval of the rezoning is reasonable because the proposed low-density residential conditional zoning district is consistent with the 2045 land use plan. The proposed rezoning is also reasonable and in the public interest because it permits single-family residential development consistent and compatible with the surrounding area. The proposed rezoning will maintain the character and appearance of the area and provide a flexibility to accommodate the growth in population, economy, and infrastructure consistent with that contemplated by the 2045 land use map. Planning staff can recommend approval with conditions as offered by the applicant. I'm happy to answer questions as well as the applicant who's in the audience.
Any questions right now? Okay, would the applicant like to make a statement?
Good evening, everyone. My name is John Woodliff. I'm with Bass, Nixon & Kennedy Engineering Consultants, and I represent the applicant for this rezoning case. I appreciate Lauren's thorough presentation, and appreciate the opportunity to answer any of your questions. I would like to point out a couple of items. As Lauren mentioned, we met with the Environmental Advisory Board and proposed several conditions, increasing the stormwater mitigation requirements, we increased the tree preservation requirement, as well as adding a pet waste station. We feel like this rezoning kind of represents a low density or low impact type development based on the density that we're proposing. We're proposing a density of 1.5 units per acre. The low density residential district allows up to 3 units per acre, so we're right at half of the maximum density for this particular zoning proposed zoning district. Again, we're saving approximately 50% of the site, and which is currently floodplain, and that represents over half of the site will be retained as resource conservation area. So again, adding to the low impact nature of this development, we feel like we're doing we're showing, you know, our best efforts to maintain the existing natural area there on the west side of the site. If you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
How much buffer do you think will be on the west side next to the tobacco trail?
On the west side, there's approximately 1.5 acres, so it's about half the site is made up of buffer and floodplain. So floodplain and buffer pretty much coincide with each other, and that represents about half the site. So really
Most of it's going to be east side loaded with where the house is.
correct. So we'll have a cul-de-sac there at Beauregard, and then 5 lots will be facing that cul-de-sac.
Can you have an idea of how large the lots will be?
The average lot size will be just over 10,000 square feet.
Do we have an average home price yet?
They'll certainly be complementary to the existing neighborhood, Weddington. Given the location backing up to the American Tobacco Trail, I would imagine they may be a little bit, a little higher price point just because of the natural area surrounding that cul-de-sac.
You really can't talk about prices.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yes.
Is this going to be part of the HOA, the Weddington HOA?
At the time, no, everything will be inclusive on this tract, so they'll have their own HOA. They'll have a mail kiosk to serve just these 5 lots. They won't have any connection whatsoever to Weddington other than the roadway connection. They'll have their own SCM, so they'll be self-contained.
Any other questions for John?
I appreciate your time.
Staff, were there any public comments that came in on voicemail or email for this? Okay, thank you. All right, so we'll now open it up to public comment. As I mentioned, please, if you haven't signed in, sign in.
Already signed there.
Okay, thank you.
So my name is Ashwin Palani and I live in 182 Weddington Park Lane, just backing up to the construction. So one of the things, I think it's already addressed. I just want to state my concern will be the increase in traffic there. So if you see, the only in and out is through the Beauregard Place into Weddington Park Lane. And so the kids currently play at Beauregard Place, and almost like all the traffic for the new houses would have to go through Weddington Park Lane, and that will be increased traffic there. And another personal concern, I don't know, I've never been to a public hearing before, but the price point of our houses, so backing up. So already there is a 10-foot buffer there. I wasn't sure the 15-foot buffer offered is in addition to it, or is it 15 foot from our property? So that wasn't clear to me, and I would like that to be known as well. So these are the 2 things I had.
John, can you address that? Is it the buffer on the east side?
I'd be happy to add
Oh.
anything as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so the buffer that currently exists along the backside of those lots that are facing Weddington Park Lane, there's a 10-foot buffer between those property lines and between the lot property lines and the actual development property line. And so our buffer, which is we are proposing a 15-foot buffer, which we're increasing by 5 feet, would be in addition to that 10-foot buffer. So they would be a total of 25-foot buffer between the backs of their lots and the first lot line on this site.
Okay, thank you. Is that what you're going to say, Laura?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak? Okay, at this time, I'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the board for discussion, possible motion.
Well, I would say that I think the applicant has done well with meeting all the environmental advisory board's conditions and self-contained, increasing the stormwater and the pet waste station, and increased trees. I think it looks really good. I think I'm gonna recommend approval.
I have a question for Lauren.
Yes, ma'am?
Lauren and Amanda, as a part of the package, there was a clarification statement that was from Wake County Public Schools on the impact. Wondering how this came about, if it was just left out of the letter or if it was requested.
Oh, Amanda could probably speak to that more, but Mr. Glenn from Wake County Public School System, he also wanted to make sure that we did include that note. It was separate from the actual Wake County Public School letter, but he wanted to also let that know, let folks know as a side that it still didn't impact it, even if it was overall, because it's such a small proposed rezoning. So I also wanted to include that attachment. So when I did provide that statement in my staff report, I wanted for you to know where it came from.
I appreciate that. So I'm trying to figure out how this email was prompted.
Oh, sure. I'll let Amanda speak to that then.
I appreciate your including it. Thank you.
So, Mr. Croza called me right before he sent the letter, and there's not, the letter is essentially a form that we agreed on, the town and Wake County Public Schools, and there's really not room in that for like explanation of this kind of thing, and so he wanted to offer that kind of footnote, so to say, and I asked him, is it okay to include that in the staff report, and he said absolutely.
Thank you. That context is very helpful.
Yeah.
I did want to say a few things on this. I live off Castleberry Road, so I run through this area frequently, every 3 times a week. And I got to say, the woods on this piece of property are probably the most pretty, low-lying hardwoods. Open bottom is gorgeous, and I'm elated to hear from the applicant that, you know, half of it's going to be saved. 5 lots is probably going to be a stretch, just given how much there is out there that's probably alluvial soils and local floodplain and buffers. But having said that, I've seen what happened across the street when the Toll Brothers developments happened, both next door off the old Emily Fields, and they destroyed what was left between the American Tobacco and the development. And I think it wasn't anything that they did maliciously. I think it was a function of, you know, all that water came down off the hill after it was denuded and it blew out the erosion control. So with that in mind, I'm supportive of this, but I was wondering if we could solicit Mr. Woodley, if it would be possible to proffer potentially like double silt fence or something just in addition, because this is such a critical area that everybody uses for Apex and Cary. Everybody that walks through here, I mean, there's hundreds, probably close to 1,000 rooftops just locally within the last few years. It's such heavily trafficked and it's so pretty through there. I hate after a rain event seeing all the mud. And I do development too, I get it, but there's got to be a better way we could do it, and I think double silt fence is easy, it's low hanging fruit, and it would help protect that area.
Yeah, and the way we kind of envision this property being developed or being laid out is we would, I mean, a double silt fence is something that we would automatically have no problems providing on the low side of the back side of the lots, if you will, but also providing a diversion ditch that would divert the water all the way around to probably the south side of the site, which is more of the low side where we're anticipating our SCM to be located. And so that would basically keep all the runoff on our site, you know, and of course the silt fence would be an added measure of protection, but we certainly, you know, would want to be as cautious as we can be about the existing vegetation there.
I presume you looked at the sanitary sewer and you would connect on the south side through to the existing sewer outfall right there?
Yeah, that's the only location that we have to access that. So we'd have to cross the creek there just for that connection. We haven't analyzed the depths of the sewer there to see if it would be an aerial or if it would be underground under the creek itself. But we
Empirically speaking, what happened was they did a sewer outfall for the development on the west side, and instead of doing an aerial, they dammed it up, and then they backed up water against the tobacco trail and probably killed off everything in the buffer there. So that's the type of thing that I walk by, I see it, and I'm like, God, I just wish somebody just took a walk out there and just, like, did it a little bit better.
Yeah, I was noticing those contours, and it looked. I was suspicious as to how that was installed, but as you're saying, it did. I could definitely see how it would have backed up that stream. But we'll do, we'll check the inverts and, do our best to make that connection with as little disturbance as possible. Yep.
Any other comments or possible motion?
We have a motion from Keith.
Was a motion?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I'll just add one more thing, and I know I will sound like a broken record. I do appreciate, and thank you, Amanda, for clarifying the context in which the comments came in from Wake County Public Schools, but it is 5 units, but that is 5 units that we're adding to an incredibly crowded school system. So I'm going to continue to raise that as a point of, to put a finer point on it. We're stressing our communities, we're stressing our community schools, we're stressing new parents, we're stressing older parents in the area who've been here for a while, we're stressing new parents in the area who are putting their kids in public schools, and we're asking we're asking parents to make some really tough decisions around this. So I'm going to continue to put a finer point on that, but I do appreciate the Wake County's addition to this statement, and we'll be voting in favor of this, and so I will put a second motion out there.
Okay, so we have a motion from Keith and a second from Tina. Any other discussion? I'll make a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Lauren. Let's see, at this time, I think Keith needs to recuse himself, so I need a motion, please.
Make a motion to recuse Keith.
I have a motion from Reggie. I need a second.
Second.
Second from Tim. All those in favor? I say aye. Okay, Keith, if you step out, we'll get you back in on item number 5. So Lauren, you're going to present the public hearing and possible motion regarding rezoning case 21CZ22, Old Ivy Road Residential.
Yes, sir. Would you like me to wait for him to exit the chambers?
I think he's walking fast enough. I think we're good.
Okay. Just thought I would ask, just in case.
Thank you.
Okay, this is rezoning case 21CZ22, Old Ivy Road Residential, located at 1516 Old Ivy Road and 7620 McQueens Drive. The properties are located in this general ETJ area. The subject properties are a total of 8.82 acres and located west of Old Ivy Road, north of Jenks Road, you can see that label in the corner, and west of the preserve at White Oak Creek subdivision. The subject property located at 7620 McQueens Drive is currently vacant with existing vegetation, and the property located at 1516 Old Ivy Road contains residential structures and has existing vegetation. The properties are currently zoned rural residential. The adjacent zonings are to the north and east, rural residential, west and south, planned unit development conditional zoning, which is associated with preserve at White Oak Creek, with a small portion of rural residential, so it's kind of sharing on the south. The applicant is proposing to rezone the properties to low-density residential conditional zoning. The 2045 land use map identifies this as low density. The proposed rezoning to low density residential conditional zoning is consistent with that land use classification. The applicant conducted a neighborhood meeting on August 26, 2021, and a copy of the neighborhood report is in your packet. A full list of the proposed uses and zoning conditions can be found on page 2 of the staff report. The applicant is proposing single-family, accessory apartment, greenway, recreation facility private, park active, park passive, and utility minor. So besides the residential architectural conditions we typically see, I wanted to point out a few zoning conditions. Zoning condition number 1, the project density will not exceed 3.00 dwelling units per acre. Maximum number of units is 26 dwelling units, and all lots shall be greater than 6,000 square feet. Zoning condition number 2, talks about a reduction and change to setbacks. And if, I will go ahead and read those for you if you'd like. From the front setback, reduced from 25 feet minimum to 20 feet minimum. Side setback, reduced from 8 feet minimum with a 20-foot aggregate to a 5-foot minimum. The rear setback is reduced from 25 feet minimum to 15 feet minimum. And corner side setback, reduced from 18 feet minimum to 15 feet minimum. Number 6, zoning condition number 6, the overhead Duke Energy electric easement from Jenks Road to Old Ivy shall be counted towards the required RCA and buffer standards as identified with various UDO sections. And zoning condition number 7, Vining Branch Way shall be remain closed to construction traffic until dedicated to the town of Apex. And number 8, prior to recording the final plat for the property, the developer shall provide a donation of the town of Apex's Affordable Housing Fund in the amount of $215 per dwelling unit. The Environmental Advisory Board held a pre-application meeting for this rezoning on August 18th, 2021. The zoning conditions suggested by the EAB are listed on page 3 of the staff report, along with the applicant's response to each condition and whether the applicant provided the conditions or not. A letter of impact from Wake County Public School System was received for this rezoning and is included in the staff report packet. Wake County Public School System indicates that school at all grade levels within the current assignment area for the proposed rezoning development are anticipated to have sufficient capacity for future students.
Sufficient.
Sufficient. I made sure to emphasize that. Approval of rezoning is reasonable because the proposed low-density residential conditional zoning district is consistent with the 2045 land use plan. The proposed rezoning is reasonable as well because it permits single-family residential development consistent and compatible with the existing development to the east and south. The subject rezoning would also allow for development that will extend Vining Branch Way to Old Ivy Road. The proposed rezoning will maintain the character and appearance of the area and provide the flexibility to accommodate the growth in population, economy, and infrastructure consistent with that contemplated by the 2045 land use map. Planning staff can recommend approval with the conditions as offered by the applicant. I'm happy to answer questions as well as the applicant in the audience.
Thank you, Lauren. Does anybody have any questions for Lauren at this time?
Lauren, could you clarify the proposed zoning conditions? These are all the ones that were proposed by the applicant?
Correct on the staff report, I just highlighted a few.
No, but they were all the ones that were proposed by the applicant?
Oh, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Thanks, Lauren. The applicant would like to make a statement.
Chairman Marks, members of the planning board, Jeff Roach with Peak Engineering and Design. Before I go anything, I'm going to reiterate what Mr. Skinner said, sufficient. That's something that we don't hear very often with schools these days, so I want to make sure that's pointed out here. I'm sorry? I'm sorry, sufficient. I can't spell it, but I can say it. So I have like a 15-minute presentation here, but I'm definitely not going to go through it. I appreciate Lauren and staff working with us through a number of issues going through here. But I do want to just touch on a couple big points. It matches the 2045 land use plan. It's low density residential, so we've capped it at 3 units an acre. We will probably be below that, a couple units. Just kind of depends on the layout. The proposed lot sizes are bigger than what's adjacent to us west in the preserve at White Oak. In this area over here, those lots are about 52 to 5,500 square feet, give or take, so we're a little bit bigger. The reason for the reduction in the setbacks is to match the PUD that was right next door. We're going for generally the same look. Lauren mentioned Vining Branch Way going out to Old Ivy. It's actually not going to connect. We're going to try to make it a little bit harder to get out, meaning that we don't want people going straight through there at 30 miles an hour. So our design is going to probably keep Vining Branch Way in our development with a little stub street out to Old Ivy. Slow people down a little bit. all the conditions that were proffered are our conditions after either meeting with staff, talking to the owner applicant, our neighborhood meetings, our EAB meeting, the 25-year storm, signage for environmental features, native flora, various species throughout the development. And then once again, there's that school capacity thing that I'm very happy to say we actually have it for a change. So it is a small site. It's only 8.5 acres. The use that's there now is a nuisance. I think it's probably a good way to say it, with the tree chipping and stuff that's going on that site. And just so everybody knows, we did talk to the property owner there in the south. And give me 1 second. The green here, just directly south of us, we did talk to her about coming in as part of the project, and she was not interested. Just to let you guys know, because she is going to end up with a little piece of property set there. She does have, direct access to Jinks Road for future connectivity, but we tried to bring her into the project. I talked to her multiple times, and she was not interested. So with that, I will stop running my mouth and open it up to you guys for any questions or respond to any comments from the public.
Any questions for Mr. Roach?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just super quick, Jeff. The RCA and the overhead power lines for Duke's overhead, is Apex going to co-locate on those lines? Is that the idea?
I don't know yet, and we've run into it in the past where I'm unable to count it because Duke Energy is not considered a public utility easement because they're a private company. It's only Apex Utility, sewer, water, and stuff like that. So it's really up to Rodney what he wants to do. I haven't approached him yet, other than to make sure that we can count that area.
Mr. Roach, I do want you to know that I did highlight in my report that it had sufficient capacity. I was so excited about it myself.
You highlighted the capacity. I'm going to step up here because I can't actually see you. So
Thank you. I'm sorry, and I'm all.
No, that's fine.
Okay. So I did have a question about the setbacks. I understand that you want to match the adjacent properties. I typically tend to think if we can maximize rather than minimize, we're going to, we're going to have a little bit more green space, even if it's not actually green. So I'm wondering if that is a proposed condition that you would be willing to withdraw.
I'm sorry, say that to withdraw the changes to the setbacks?
Yeah, to the setbacks.
We can't because our lot size is what it is, based upon the unit that's proposed from the buyer of the property. So the setbacks are set, specifically the front setback is set because that's the minimum setback for a driveway from the garage to either the right-of-way line or the back of the sidewalk, to prevent a car from blocking it. Sorry, I'll step back over here. The rear setback is a 5-foot reduction in it. Again, I think that matches what's next door to get the smaller lot, but still have a decent sized house on the property. And the 5-foot side setback is a typical single family. For anything under, 55 feet or so, it's shrinking the sides. So, Ms. Sherman, I would love to pull it, but right now I can't. Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Roach? Okay, thank you, Jeff.
Sit down.
Yep. Lauren, did we receive any emails or any voicemails, public comment? Okay, all right. At this time, we'll open up for public comment. Anybody wishing to speak on this case, please come forward. Seeing none, I'll close the public comment and bring it back to the board for discussion or possible motion.
I will reiterate my excitement for the sufficient. I am concerned about the setbacks. I think until we've broken ground, there's always room to make some adjustments, and so yeah, I'm concerned about the setbacks being minimized.
What you want? Bigger setback?
I don't want it reduced. I want it to be not from the 25 to 20 minimum. I want it to remain at 25, remain at 8. See, the reason for reduction, to match we have the setbacks for a reason, and it also adds to green space, which is something that's important in the community, even if it's not entirely green. So I see it as important and don't see the reason for reduction. And until we've broken ground, I think there's always room to make some adjustments. But I'm excited about sufficient capacity.
I guess I come at that a little bit differently. I get excited when I see, more units on, inching up on the density, because that means per unit about $4,000 into our Parks and Rec fee, plus another $250 per unit that they proffered into the affordable housing fund, which is growing. That's pretty exciting in the town. I mean, if it's in keeping with that White Oak, that thing is selling like hotcakes. So while I hear what you're saying, I know that the people that are buying it are pretty happy because they're lined up. I don't see any reason why I wouldn't support this. I think the development community stepped up and has helped the school capacity, especially with the last few cases we saw in this area. They've actually done what they said, and lo and behold, we're actually getting more schools, which I think that's awesome, the partnership.
So do I see a motion?
I will make a motion to approve.
So I have a
case number
motion.
21 CZ 22.
A motion from Ryan. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Reggie. Any other discussion? If not, we'll make a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Laura?
5-0.
I'm sorry.
Was it 5-0 because?
2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No, 5. Yeah,
Five.
5. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yep, 5. Can somebody go get Keith and back in here before Sarah comes up? Or I don't see Sarah.
I'll be,
You're Sarah tonight? Okay. We'll let Keith get back to his seat. So Amanda will be sending a public hearing and possible motion regarding rezoning case 21 CZ 23, the Scotch Ridge Office and Veterinarian Hospital.
yes, so this rezoning is located on Apex Barbecue Road, kind of more or less central to our jurisdiction, specifically on the south side of Apex Barbecue Road and surrounded by the Scotts Ridge Elementary School property. The two properties proposed to be rezoned are about 1.45 acres and are currently zoned residential agricultural, which is the surrounding zoning to the west, east, and south, and across the street is the Bungalow Park at Scotts Mill Townhomes, which is on high-density multifamily conditional use. The proposed rezoning is neighborhood business conditional zoning. The 2045 land use map designates these properties as medium-density residential, and which is inconsistent with the zoning proposed, but if the rezoning is approved, the land use map will automatically be adjusted to commercial services in accordance with North Carolina's general statutes. The applicant did conduct a neighborhood meeting on August 30th, and you have that meeting report in your packet. The applicant has proposed 26 uses for this development. The uses school, public or private, and vocational school are only to be allowed if recombined with the Scotts Ridge Elementary School properties. The other uses are office and retail in nature. I'll highlight a few. Veterinary clinic or hospital, medical or dental office, business or professional, personal service, real estate sales, retail sales general, and tailor shops. That's just a highlight of some of the uses. The applicant has offered some of the typical architectural, non-residential architectural standards. And in addition, the applicant has proposed that solar conduit be included for future installation of rooftop solar panels. And the applicant has offered almost all of the zoning conditions suggested by the Environmental Advisory Board. There was one condition not offered, which was install a minimum of 14 kilowatt rooftop solar PV system on the office building, subject to shading requirements. And the applicant stated that existing tree canopy may compete with this system, and that could be evaluated later during building and site design. Planning staff is recommending approval of the rezoning with the conditions offered by the applicant. As I stated before, the zoning will be consistent with the land use map if it is approved due to North Carolina general statutes requiring that automatic change to the map. And approval of the rezoning is reasonable and in the public interest because the proposed zoning will allow for non-residential development that will serve the surrounding neighborhoods and will increase the tax base. Happy to answer any questions that you may have about this rezoning.
Thank you, Amanda. Any questions for Amanda at this time? Jeff?
Is it safe to assume that Kepler Preservation was involved with this?
Yes, this CAP did evaluate the house on site, and there were changes made over time that caused it to lose its historic character.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Amanda?
Amanda, can you address, I know there's going to be a right in, right out of Apex Barbecue. Can you talk a little bit about any other transportation measures that will be addressed there?
Well, I mean, that will be evaluated during the minor site plan submittal when we actually see the square footage and actual use that's proposed. But like I said, it will be restricted to right in, right out access.
Thanks, Amanda. Mr. Roach, would you like to make a statement?
Still Jeff Roach with Peak Engineering and Design. I appreciate the staff putting me back to back. It's great. Really, I'm not even going to go into staff's report. Jeff asked a great question about the historic. We had Jeremy Bradham out there to do the evaluation, and Gary also came out and looked at it, and it's not historic. They made a number of changes, specifically the windows and the house is basically collapsing on itself. The other point that I want to go into is Teen asked about it, is the right in, right out. We will, of course, work with Russell. We worked with him through the pre-application process, knowing it would be a right in, right out. And then when we get to site plans, depending on what the use is, right now it's leaning towards a vet hospital. But there again, as time goes on, that's what we're hoping for. I think that's what's going to end up happening. One of the buyers' wife's a vet, so most likely that's the use. And then back to the EAB condition about solar. There are some really large oak trees on this site, so you'll see there's actually a condition in here for preservation of some of the larger trees. We're picking up the zoning right now to find out where those trees are, to lay the site out around those trees, and those trees are definitely going to be in the way of any solar, rooftop solar. So that's why I couldn't commit to it at EAB. Not to mention 14 kilowatts is a pretty big system, so I'm not sure I would have committed to it anyway. No offense. So anyway, with that, it was kind of set aside as a change to the 2045 land use plan, but with the school not purchasing the property a couple years ago, the house is really set right next to a school. So we work with staff to show this as a local business type thing. But with that, I hope to get your support tonight on it and answer any questions.
Any questions for Jeff?
I have a question. So there was another vet hospital that was coming off of Jinx Road. And I think one of the items that had popped up at that point was a fence just kind of going around the perimeter to ensure, I think one of the neighbors had proposed, had some legitimate concerns about, being right there. As far as a school being there, I would assume that there are also some type of mitigation of, I don't think there's going to be animals running wild. That's not the case, but you never know. Being right next to the school, and that's the pickup. What all do you have?
So we'll have perimeter buffers around the entire site. I don't know exactly what they're going to be. Most likely a type B buffer that will stop. Visibility will eventually grow in. Every vet pretty much has a drop-off place now. So if the vet hospital does come in, and any outdoor areas are always fenced in, and then every vet is required to have their animals on leash. At the last vet hospital was up on Jinx Road, which I also represented. In talking with her, she said the number of animals that actually get free at vets is very limited. She actually couldn't remember any at her vet that have gotten loose because they all come there, they're on leash, or they're brought directly in. They're either sick or they're injured, or a typical checkup. So they're all on leash. When they come into the building, they're always kept on leash and always kept under control with somebody with them that has them under control. So I don't anticipate it being a problem.
Okay.
But those are some of the things that they do, is they do fence in any outdoor areas. And this is not an overnight kennel. The vet that's looking at it is not an overnight kennel. Most of them are day service. And there again, they refer them to an overnight facility if there's, if they have to board them, if they have to keep them, if it's 2 in the morning.
Okay. Do you know if the services also will be rendered having just daytime boarder drop-off services?
It's not a
or anything like
daycare.
that?
It's not a doggy
It's not-
daycare.
Okay.
No, it's not like the one over off of Investment Boulevard that's actually a doggy daycare. This one is truly, like I said, they're proposing it to be a vet hospital. It does have a list of other uses it could be, but if it is a vet hospital, it's it's a 7 to 6 o'clock type hourly thing, and it's
Is
not
there-
a doggy daycare.
Is there a definition between, I mean, could this turn into a kennel type once they are a vet and then start offering these services? My concern would be right next to a school and dogs like to bark, and that could be very annoying for the school that's right there if they start,
Absolutely.
that just wouldn't be good for them, so.
So, and Amanda can correct me if I'm wrong here, but typically the vets are they don't want to have 3 or 4 dogs out at a time. And if they do have a dog outside, it's on leash because they're trying to get recovery or get it back home. It's not outside just to run through the yard and bark at the other dogs like a doggy daycare would be. So typical vet hospital action now is to keep them on leash, get them recovered, and get them out as quick as they can.
Okay.
Is that Mr. Rose?
Yeah, I just wanted to see if there was a clear definition though, just making sure that if you do have is there a different definition for someone who does have those services where they drop off? Okay, so it sounds like there are, versus a vet. So you can't just say, hey, we'll offer a vet service. We're not doing that now, but in the future, we decided to add on to the facility. We're going to start doing this as a drop off like Town and Country would. So that could not happen with the uses right now.
Correct.
Okay.
We'd have to come back for zoning again to add kennel, and at that point, somebody would have to stand up here and prove why it makes sense.
Got it.
12-foot fence everywhere. Yeah. So, Ms. Sherman, you had a question?
Full disclosure, I'm a parent at elementary school there, so full disclosure.
So now you can take your pets to the vet hospital too.
I'm wondering, you were talking about the buffers and the fencing, and I want to see if I can get some clarity, because I'm confused about what there will be offered. And forgive me, but I do understand that, people walk in with a leash and walk out with a leash and all of that, but dogs can still escape, and right there, below that bottom yellow line is the playground. And there's a fence around that playground. That's a playground. That's going to be a lot of kids out there that are going to be exciting any animals that are coming in and out of that structure. So I do want to understand what that perimeter is going to look like. I understand it's going to be a buffer, but
Yeah, it's a great question and a great concern. I don't want to ever build something that's going to put somebody at risk either. So on the existing school site, there is the perimeter buffer here, as you can see on the aerials. On our site, we'll also have a planted buffer on our side. And then any areas that are attached to the building where the animals will be outside with a technician or a vet, where they'll be on leash, will also be fenced in. So the only fencing will be adjacent with the building where they're trying to get the animal outside to make sure they're recovered enough to go home from day surgery or whatever they're there for. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Roach? All right, thank you, Jim.
Thank you, everybody.
This time we'll open up Amanda, was there any mail-in or voicemail public comments?
If it's okay, I think our client would be willing to offer a 10-foot buffer along the southern boundary to buffer the school to help some additional plantings in that back area. Whether it's a buffer or whether it's a planted area, it starts down the slope anyway. So we can write up a condition, Amanda, before we get to council if that works. But I will go on record here as saying, yes, we will do a buffer along the southern boundary.
I'm going to take that buffer, but I want to be clear, I wasn't asking for a buffer.
No, that's...
I was absolutely concerned about fencing, and you answered that question.
Yeah.
I'm not going to I'm never going to turn that buffer.
And to me, it's more about plantings than it is a buffer. It's about having some plantings in the back. But I'll work on a condition with staff that goes to council that says something associated with plantings and a buffer. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Amanda, any comments, emails or voicemails?
There were none.
Okay, all right, so open up for public comment. Anybody wish to come forward? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment and bring it back to the board for any other discussion or possible motion.
I, for one, am excited that, this isn't impacting Wake County Public Schools for us. But I'm also honestly, sincerely excited that ever since Scott's Ridge was being, ground was broken, I was wondering what was going to happen with this home and if it was historic and exactly what was going to happen. So I am excited to see that there is this proposed potential clinic. I know we're a long way, we're not quite there yet, but that there's this proposed development, that seems to make sense, that will service the community, and the surrounding neighbors, and I appreciate the addressing of my concerns.
Is that a possible motion too?
I don't want to give up anybody else's.
Anybody else
votes.
have any
I'm
discussion?
happy to make a motion to approve, I have a different one, to approve the proposed policy.
21 CZ 23.
Thank you, yeah, I switched which one I had up.
Okay, so I have a motion from Tina. Do I have a second?
A second.
Second from Keith. Any other discussion before we vote?
I appreciate Jeff looking into the site and trying to make the layout of the building work with the site versus the site to the building. You know, I appreciate looking at it that way, because I think that is a good, a nice place to preserve where you can.
All right. Any other discussion? All right. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, Liz was going to present CZ 24, but the applicant has asked that one to be withdrawn, so we'll move to item number 7. Shelley is going to present public hearing and possible motion regarding rezoning case 21 CZ 25, the Village of Apex PUD amendment.
Thank you.
Shelley?
Just to kind of orient you to the site, it's over there. So this is the kind of northwestern-ish, mostly north-ish corner of Laura Duncan, and at that point Hunter Street. We also, the roads change names at this intersection. Comes Old Raleigh Road over here and Mason Street over here. It's about 3.62 acres or so, and is currently zoned planned unit development conditional zoning, and will be amended to be planned unit development conditional zoning. So it's the last piece of undeveloped land in the Villages of Apex overall PUD. The applicant conducted a neighborhood meeting on August 25th, 2021, and that meeting report is attached to your staff report. The proposed rezoning is consistent with the 2045 land use map. We did request a letter of impact from Wake County Public Schools, but we have not received it as of yet. Part of the reason for that is because, scratch that part, we are not concerned about an unusual increase to the impact to Wake County Public Schools, because they factored in the density for all of the proposed units when this was originally zoned. And this project is not proposing to increase that density at all. What they are proposing to do is to shift some of the previously approved density to this site. So it's just a reallocation. It is not an increase in any way. On the maps that associated the original rezoning for the Villages of Apex, this parcel was designated as retail and office only. Now, under our UDO, you can allow an accessory use if it takes up no more than 25% of the floor area of the building. So about 4 years ago, we had a site plan come in for a 4-story building that had 3 stories of non-residential on it and 1 story of apartments on the top. Unfortunately, when this was put to bid, the cost ended up exceeding what the developer could afford to do at the time, so they have put it up for sale. This applicant would like to do still vertical mixed use, but mostly residential, with the first floor being reserved primarily for non-residential. So it's kind of a flip-flop, if you will. So this would be the amendment to the map itself. We would just be adding attached residential onto it, which is consistent with the way it was phrased on the other parcels, and the color is consistent with the way it was phrased within the rest of the map as well. And then these conditions are to kind of clarify things that I understand that they're small and they might be a little bit difficult to read. So the first one is that any multifamily units will have a maximum of 2 bedrooms. That is because the applicant is also requesting that the parking requirements be adjusted to align with the current UDO parking requirements for 2 bedrooms or less. The existing PUD requires 1.8 spaces per unit, regardless of the number of bedrooms. When we updated our parking requirements a few years ago, we changed it so that it's 1.5 for 2 bedrooms or less. And in order to fix that and bring it into compliance, the applicant has to propose this. So we did add that this would not apply to townhomes because 1.5 units per, because it does say attached residential on there. We didn't want to completely get rid of the potential that it could be townhomes if somebody wanted to at some point, if this fell through. But we did want to make it clear that this does not apply to townhomes. The applicant also received a comment from some of the residents during their neighborhood meeting with regards to the potential for light intrusion on their property. So on the other side of the creek is the back end of the townhomes for some of the villages of Apex. And they were concerned that since the building is intended to front the street, the parking will be behind the building, and therefore they would see more of the lighting from the parking lot. So the applicant has agreed to install light timers, motion sensors, or, you know, a third option that I just don't know about yet, possibly. Another smart lighting technology for all the lighting within the parking lot. The intent being that if nobody's out there and needs it, then either the light will be dramatically reduced or will go off entirely, limiting the impact to the residents. The applicants also asked for an increase to the maximum height of mixed-use buildings only. This is specific to this, to a combination of mixed uses within the building, to 5 stories. And that's not because they're 100% certain that they need that, but depending on the layout of the site, they might. So this is a request for some flexibility. In order to make certain that we don't have any concerns with the first floor being all apartments or anything like that, and to keep it kind of something that people interact with when they walk past it, they've proposed that the first floor residential will be prohibited along Hunter Street. So if it's an L-shaped building, they might be able to have some on the Laura Duncan side, but the first floor along Hunter Street, which is the larger, kind of the more active road, would be non-residential. The project commits to planting only native plants. Landscaping will be coordinated with the planning department. And then Parks and in the original PUD, there were a list of Parks and Recreation conditions in there. This one was titled number 7 because we're amending an initial PUD. I have to list that. It originally stated that a section of public greenway at the corner of Hunter and Laura Duncan will be constructed within the 20-foot existing sewer easement. A building credit will be provided to the developer as part of that recreation requirement. So this is roughly where that would be. When the original, or when the previous development proposal came in, which did not require a rezoning amendment, we took that greenway off of our master plan because it didn't seem to make sense anymore. You're going to have a public sidewalk along both corners, and it's not that we never put down any pavement or anything like that. It's just been a mowed sewer easement that people will still be able to walk along for the most part. The development might to some degree be on top of that. We don't know that yet, but this is basically to bring this rezoning into compliance with our master plan. We didn't realize at the time that the rezoning required that, or else we would have come back to you before and asked to take it off. So the PUD complies with the Thoroughfare and Collector Street plan. A TIA update was performed as a part of the review consistent with the town standards. Based on that update, the applicant has agreed to the following traffic improvements. Actually, I'm going to let Russell read these out to you. He does a better job of explaining exactly where things are going to be than I do. So, if you don't mind.
You have them written down?
I do have them written
I
down.
know what they are, but I don't know how they're worded.
You're-
So along Laura Duncan Road, they have one proposed site drive accessing the project. This is the same as it was before the previous project. So it's located north of the intersection there at Old Riley Road, which leaves space for essentially a two-way left turn lane between. So what we've recommended is 50 feet of storage and 75 feet of taper northbound on Laura Duncan Road accessing that driveway. You know, and the intersection operates fine. The left turn exiting is level of service C is the worst that we saw for that. The intersection there at Old Riley Road, the traffic signal will operate with the same level service B, before as after the project. So we don't see any significant impacts at the intersection. It is offset from the existing intersection at Vineyard Station, but it's offset enough and the left turns don't conflict. So the location, just as before, is the same recommendation we had previously.
Whereabouts would the driveway, the entrance be?
Ish.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, not quite up. Yeah, because I think I guess there's some features that cut through the site where it starts to narrow down to that triangle, so it's just short of where that triangle is for the north end of the site.
Whenever they develop the corner of this, I guess that'd be the northeast corner, Laura Duncan and Old Raleigh, they would have to just use the Vineyard Station access. There wouldn't be any more access coming out of that.
Correct. Yeah, nothing across from Vineyard
Okay.
Station, if that's what you're
Okay.
asking. That's correct. So with that, we don't recommend anything additional. So essentially, I don't need to read verbatim, but essentially the conditions, those are what they recommend. So it's consistent with the previous plan.
Thank you, Russell.
They have agreed to a zoning condition, making sure to limit to just the one entrance off of Laura Duncan.
So
And that's
nothing
not
on
because,
100th Street.
no.
Okay. All right.
And that's not because we think that anybody will try to ask for a different one. It's just to make sure that it's clear cut going forward what the expectations are. So,
Is that right in, right out only?
Full movement on Laura Duncan.
Full
yes,
movement, okay.
it is a full movement.
You think the parking that we have in front of the Farm Bureau building, would we extend that down to have more just off-street?
We already have it extended to right about here, if you can see the mouse.
Yeah.
And that's about as far as we want it at this point. It's just because of the movements on
Okay.
through here, because people coming around this, so
They're backing
down
out.
this way, you have people slowing towards the intersection. Once you come around Laura Duncan and take that right, you have people speeding up, and we don't want people
Backing
rear-ending each other and having that be an issue.
That makes sense. Okay,
So-
thank you.
Shelley, real
Yes.
quick, if they install sidewalk as part of the frontage improvements on Laura Duncan, is there gonna be a gap between Great Northern Station and this corner?
Nope, there's actually sidewalk up to about here.
Okay.
You can kind of almost see where it kind of bulbs out a little bit.
Yeah.
So it goes up to the sewer easement right now, and they would just extend it down through and then connect what's missing along through here. This went to Parks and Rec. They recommended fee in lieu for the apartments, and they recommended approval of the change to the greenway. This site was actually also part of what was looked at for the downtown master plan. And the downtown master plan that was adopted in 2019 recommended increasing the number and mixture of housing units basically within the Peakway. And within the Peakway by about 850 units, and then within about a half a mile of downtown by 340 units. This is almost exactly half a mile from Chatham and Salem, so like the main intersection. And the rezonings will meet that recommendation. It also recommended increasing the retail, office, and restaurant opportunities within the Peakway, which is another option or another recommendation this would meet. This project did not go to the Environmental Advisory Board because there's this section in the UDO that says that rezonings which seek to amend zoning conditions that have no environmental impact on site, including but not limited to architectural standards, building height, setbacks, and uses are exempt from having to go to the EAB. We did, however, think about some of the reasons, some of the things that the EAB tends to ask for, which is why the applicant agreed to the native plantings option as well. Planning staff recommends approval of the application as shown and is agreed to by the applicant. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. The applicant is also here to answer any questions you might have.
We don't have any 5-story buildings within that area right now, do we?
We don't.
Okay. Yeah, that's the only, I'm not thrilled about a 5-story building right across from that.
We did have one emailed comment that was sent to y'all on the 5th.
Yeah.
That was Robin Yurden, I can't read my own handwriting, and she lives on Chessie Station. She's in one of these townhomes here in the back, 558 Chessie Station.
Okay, yeah, I got that email. Okay. Any questions for Shelley at this time?
Shelley, I have a quick question. In the staff report, there's an illustration of what the proposal might include and had kind of the building form versus what was approved versus what could be. Is that something that's committed to, or is that just an illustrative that what this could be?
It's just an illustration to give kind of a visual impact. This is not the final architectural rendering by any means. There's a kind of corner entrance thing that was discussed as well that will not be there. Or so I've been advised. And are you referring to the items that were within the neighborhood meeting packet or the items that were part of the application? Because there are different elevations depending on what you're looking at. The ones that were in the neighborhood meeting had 3 or 4 different possible looks. The one that came from the neighborhood, from the application. They're all illustrative regardless. I was just clarifying for myself.
Why don't we, does the applicant like to make a statement?
Good evening, Chairman Marks and Planning Board. I'm Curtis Calhoun with Enclave Holdings. I'm a longtime resident of Apex, 14 years, and I live just on Saunders Street, just south of the police station. This would be our first development here in Apex. We have other properties in Raleigh and throughout the southeast that we've done redevelopments on. But I drive by this site every day, and as I laid eyes on it, I envisioned what we have there proposed. Also, as Shelley mentioned, this is in agreement with the land use plan of 2045, and also, you know, the goal of this was to keep kind of the consistency of the proposed site that was already approved. Really, what we've desired to do is just kind of wrap that corner, so increase the building footprint. The increase in height is really for flexibility. One, for the amount of units, with cost of land and trying to keep rents affordable, we want to be able to have the project be financially feasible, and with the rents that we're projecting, increasing units is the opportunity there to go up one more story than what was previously approved. Also, the height increase would help with parking. So if we need to shorten up the building footprint in order to increase parking, surface parking there, that allows us to also achieve the units by shortening up the footprint but being able to go vertical. We feel like it's consistent with the current commercial uses around, obviously with the 2 grocery stores, the gas station, and then obviously the Primrose School, which is adjacent. I would have loved to have Caddy Corner, kind of similar buildings, but Primrose picked that up before we could. I just think that would be a cool kind of entrance into that. And also, you know, we didn't get the Wake County, and I know that we're not increasing any of the any of the density that's already been pre-approved with the villages. But, you know, our goal in targeting this is for empty nesters. I mean, we have 2-bedroom units, studios, and 1-bedrooms. Obviously, the new senior center across the way, this is within walkable distance to that, as well as the 2 grocery stores, and then downtown. And in our analysis, we've got sufficient office in and around downtown. You've got the co-working space, you've got the new Opidian development that's right there on the corner of Saunders, and then you've got this one here on Hunter, which I believe is owner occupied, but and then the Farm Bureau one, the Halley building, that I think may still have vacant shell space from when it was developed. So there really is no increased demand for office, but we'd love to contribute on the affordable housing side as far as making more units available for rent, which we don't have much of.
You think you could get retail on the Laura Duncan frontage side versus turning that? I'd really like to have more retail.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely able to go. We talked about that with staff, and we just limited to Hunter Street, but we would definitely be open to having commercial extend down Laura Duncan, depending on what the floor plans look like, and getting approval for the height restrictions. So,
what do you think the odds are that you need that 5th story? Like I said, it's kind of it's kind of the gateway to downtown, and just having, especially if on Laura Duncan, it's 5 stories of apartments. It's just not the real look that I would like to see.
Mm-hmm. It really depends on the full architectural drawings that we can get. We don't have those yet, and we also don't want to be too constrained in the size of the units, being that it's already 1-bedrooms, studios, and then the 2-bedrooms, and again, feasibility on that. And in the property next door that Halley developed, I guess you're calling it the Farm Bureau building. I mean, that's 3 stories with almost a 4th-story parapet there. And again, we feel that it's consistent with, it would not be obstructing any views, because it's corner and you've got commercial on all the other 3 corners.
Anybody else have any questions for Curtis at this time?
Thank you.
Do we need, the email that came in, does that need to be read into the record, or is it? Okay. All right, so this time I'll open up the public hearing. Anybody wants to come forward, please come forth at this time.
Can we get a number of how many units that would make?
Do you have an estimated number of units of how many are 1-bedroom, how many are 2-bedroom, how many are studio? Was it?
The number that was sent to Wake County Public Schools was approximately 90 units overall, which is actually fair. It's medium-sized for an apartment complex. We normally see around, for the large ones, we normally see around 200, 250. For the very small ones, you'll see anywhere from 6 to 30 or so. And then, but the available number of units that are still within the existing villages of Apex density that was originally approved is about 168, just to give you a reference frame.
Thank you, Shelley.
I would just say that the majority would be 2-bedroom, so it's roughly 62 bedroom, and the remainder is a mix between studio and 1-beds. Yeah.
Thanks. You can come forward. Just come forward, state your name and address, please.
My name is Mary Nearing. And we live directly over the pond from them.
What's your address?
576 Chessie Station.
Okay.
And I don't know how they do, if they have separate sewers, but our pond goes up almost halfway up to where the trees are when they have the heavy rains. And I would just think that it would either have to be dug out much more, or, you know, you're going to have flood. And the other concern is that, of course, for us, is that we lose all the most of the trees behind us. But I think the water is my biggest concern.
Okay. Thank you, Mary.
If you don't mind me just,
Yeah, just discuss the,
the stormwater pond that currently is out there is not sized for any additional stormwater, so this site would be required to treat their own stormwater, so it should not impact your pond. Just as the previous proposal for this site had its own stormwater pond and its own treatment, so there should not.
Between our pond and that.
Correct, there was a space between the two of them.
Yeah, but what's the buffer? What are they going to put in there to buffer it?
It's going to be left undisturbed, generally. I mean, if,
That's swampy now.
I'm sorry?
So, I think she's asking what the buffer is between.
the pond,
So,
their
yeah,
pond and.
Their pond is currently here. There's already a 50-foot buffer from, basically this property line runs the middle of a wetlands that runs through there that cannot be disturbed. And so there's already a 50-foot buffer there plus this pond area. So, and we would have another 50 on this side, so there's at least 100 feet.
100 foot of-
Yeah.
And those trees won't be touched or anything?
Correct, the wetlands will be
There'd be
left
a-
undisturbed.
Undisturbed.
And
A
and
retention wall, a small one there.
there'd probably be a pond somewhere here-ish or here-ish, just because those are the lowest portions of the site. There used to be a stream right here, but it has actually dried up over the years. So the pond would be in this general location.
It's still swampy, and if you try, we can't walk through there, we've tried, and it's flooded, you know, it's swampy all the time.
It's a wetland.
Well, maybe the retention pond on this may actually, could help some of that, capture some of that water unit. So, any other public comments? All right, I'll close the public comment and bring it back to the board for any other discussion, questions. Go ahead, Ryan.
Question, Shelley, it's probably more of an architectural question, but none of the zoning conditions really spoke to architectural. Is that because it's an amendment to the existing zoning and there was already baked in controls?
Yes, sir. They're required to use materials similar to what you've seen on the existing Villages of Apex buildings. So brick, textured stone, fiber cement, those kinds of things, the high quality building materials that we've come to expect. And then the architecture is required to be compatible with all of that. So it's not a consistent per se, it's not a particular style, but it is required to have a similar massing and structure to it. But yes, it's because the existing PUD already has architectural requirements baked into it that we did not elect to change. You good?
Yeah, I just, I know Chairman brought up a great point about, you know, if you're going 5-6 stories, that's kind of, it's big. And if you get it get it right, it's gonna fit great into the context of Apex, but if you get it wrong, boy, it's a big nugget to get wrong, boom, and you only got one shot. We don't get to see building elevations, so we're gonna go under staff's, interpretation, review of these building elevations. It's just like during the rezoning is the one shot you've got on elevation, is to like
Yeah.
set the mood, so to speak.
And that's part of the reason why we recommended the applicant, since they don't have elevations right now, that they provide ones that are consistent with their vision. They give a little bit of variety so it doesn't lock them into any one thing, but gives a general idea of what we're looking for. Ryan and I have worked together on a number of projects, none of them
Let's only talk about the good ones.
residential, none of them commercial that I'm aware of. They've all been good projects. So staff doesn't really have the authority to work with the architects for single family and townhomes in the same way that we can for apartments and commercial, and to kind of push for higher quality architecture the same way that we can. And that's because of state law a few years ago. So Ryan does not have the experience of me telling him to go back and fix his elevations. We will not allow a terrible building to be built here. We recognize the PUD itself will not allow that. The existing PUD will not. But also, we have a vested interest in it too. It's not just that we work for the town, although that is a huge part of it and is probably 90%, but my office will look right at this building all the time. So I guarantee you this will be a beautiful building.
Okay.
I appreciate that, and I'm very torn because I'm very concerned at the level of flexibility. I don't know if I understand where we can come in and say, yea or nay. I'm concerned about 5 or 6 stories. I'm incredibly excited.
5 is the max.
Yes, 5 is
Let's take 6 off the table completely. 5.
Okay, so
4
or 5.
4 or maybe 5.
Thank you. That is helpful, bringing it down a little bit. But I am concerned about the flexibility as it relates to elevation. I am confident that you and the rest of staff will ensure, but I think having a bit more information would help quell neighbors.
I can definitely make sure that my staff report for town council includes the existing architectural conditions. That way those are, and make sure, and I apologize for missing this, I should have attached the original zoning to your packet. That's generally what I do, and I did not do that on this case, but I will make sure that town council has that. That way they have all the information in front of them.
Yeah, I think that will be helpful.
I'd almost like to just add if we do approve this, just add a statement that we strongly would like to see it stay at 4 and do everything possible to keep it within 4 stories, spread it, find a little bit more lateral feet, to get more this way so you don't have to go as high. Because I just don't want a 5-story.
If you have larger retail on the first floor, you're looking at what, 15, 20-foot floors there? So 4 stories above that is really not as high as we think. If you
Those
look at
floors
the
are generally
apartments
10
behind
to
Costco,
11, including the
right.
Retail.
well, the retail is generally anywhere between, like what you were saying, 12 to 14, 12 to 15, because they have much larger systems to hide in the ceiling. And then the residential is typically shorter because their ducts and things are nowhere near as large as what you need to hide in the roof or the ceiling of a retail. So I understand your concern.
Yeah.
We will definitely take that under advisement. If you'd like to add it as a note to town council, you're welcome to. I don't know.
I love the project because I like having retail, and the mixed use is phenomenal. Like I said, I like
have
that.
advocated for a coffee shop.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah, I think the message is just, do all we can to get you have to make money, and we don't want, $2,000 a month two-bedroom apartments either. I understand that. Any other discussion, questions?
Yeah, I don't think land price or what somebody purchases a property should dictate the size of it or the height of it so they can profit. I think that's, the market will adjust itself. If it doesn't sell, if the project doesn't go, it doesn't go. Then the person who's selling it needs to figure that out. I think, I think at 4 stories, capping it there, that's where it's at today. I don't think it should go any higher. I think 5 stories, when it's all said and done, is going to look like an atrocity to me. We don't have anything else that's 5 stories. Right now, you look at 3 stories next to the 2 stories in downtown historic area, it looks like a monster being built. I think 5 stories is quite high. I just think it's not going to be consistent with the rest of what's around there. And I'm kind of surprised that we would even think about going 5 stories. And the reasoning for going 5 stories is not a strong reason. The reasoning that we've heard from the applicant, the reason of going 5 stories is because of the price of the land. That's not a reason to increase the height. That's not justifiable to me.
Question just for staff, can we still approve it, but limit to that, or since it's all part of it, we can?
Your recommendation can include a recommendation for everything except the 5 stories. That's how you decide to vote. That's within the board's power.
I'm sorry, say that again. I'm sorry.
Since planning board is making a recommendation, if you want to recommend approval of the project with all the conditions except the increase in height, that is something that the board can recommend.
Tim, do you want to make that motion?
I think the other thing that was not quite addressed fully is whether the entire first floor, if we wrap the corner along Laura Duncan, is or is not going to be residential or retail.
Right now, it's the option for
It's an
residential.
option, right.
I'd much prefer it to be retail all above, but
I would too. That's the direction I think it should go. But I kind of would want to know, is it going to be residential or is it going to be retail? And that kind of helps.
Can we dictate that?
Well, I mean, you're talking about a certain amount of commercial space is what's being discussed.
Yeah, so this is the conundrum that is presented is I would love to see it wrap around, but then we're limited to a 4-story building would limit our units. And so therefore, having that commercial space and also limiting the height does not allow for the amount of units. So let's just say you do wrap it with commercial, and then you're limited, you're capping it to a 4-story building, and now you're down to 70 units as opposed to 90. I mean, according to our numbers, that doesn't work. So, and again, I understand, Mr. Royal, that's not something that you want to approve just based on feasibility. I mean, the look of it, having the commercial wrap the corner and having outdoor seating, that's something that we would love to see, that we would love to implement. And the opportunity to be able to, I mean, even with a setback, even if we put the 5th story on a setback, or we do a 4th story and a 5th story with a setback, that just allows us the option to be able to do that. And be able to accommodate commercial. Now, if we can keep it residential on the 1st floor, maybe we can limit it to the 4 stories. But also, as far as parking, which I know is a big concern in downtown Apex, as I'm a resident, I have the ability to walk to Fresh and get ice cream, and to Scratch. I can put my name in Scratch and wait for an hour at my house and then come back up. that's the benefit of being able to have, you know, although it may seem large scale, I think, as Mr. Skinner pointed out, that, you know, I don't think the height differential is as big of a magnitude as it seems going from 4 to 5. But it really puts us in a constraint. And I guess you can always have another daycare there. I mean,
Regrettably, regrettably and respectfully, I think, Mr. Royal, I appreciate your comments. That's perfectly right. Where I was, I think, you know, the previous applicant struggles. This is an ideal site. I'm sorry that you missed out on Primrose. That was a discussion as well.
I tried to get the food line, but that has a height restriction as well, so that's a 2-story height restriction.
But this is a prominent, ideal site. Honestly, this just might not be the right project at the right time, at the right place. And that's also a reality. Again, respectfully, that's just a reality as well. We're not just talking about the neighbors, which is always where my heart is. What do the neighbors think? What do the neighbors need? But we are literally at the center of town talking about, you know, what will be a front-facing to where folks will do business and the communities and the senior center. It has to be right. And for me, there's a lot of maybe, but, if, ands for me to be okay with this project.
If I may address just a question to the applicant. Would you be willing to work with me over the next couple of weeks to work out a step back condition for, say, the 4th and 5th floors, that it wouldn't have the same flush face with 1 through 3?
Sure.
So this has been done very successfully in a variety of places, from, as much as I hate to use them as an example, Chapel Hill, where I love Chapel Hill, that's where I went to grad school, but everybody gets this look. But they have some very large buildings compared to the rest of it that have the 4th and 5th stories stepped back so that they're not as visible from the street, and they don't have the same feel of making you a little closer feeling. Raleigh does this very successfully on a variety of their buildings as well. Granted, Raleigh is a much larger city, that's why, unfortunately, I pointed out Chapel Hill. So if the applicant's willing to work with me on that, I would be happy to work with him over the next couple of weeks before town council to I can't formulate a condition right now, but I can work with him to get one that will work, to have the 4th and 5th stories stepped back so that what you will see from the road as you're walking next to it is the same height as the building across the street. And then, you know, basically you would have to be across the street to really see the 4th and 5th stories.
But we also have neighbors directly behind. I'm not sure how that.
Well, so the neighbors actually would, this site is lower than this piece, so the neighbors will be a little bit higher anyway, but the building is intended to be on this corner here, and it's basically, after you take out the right-of-way, which is kind of like here-ish, it's basically 20 to 15 feet off that right-of-way. It's very close. So there's the huge bulk of it between the neighbors and the building. So it will not have the same impact. It will still have an impact, I can't deny that, but it won't have the same impact as if they were right next door to it. And there will be at least this 50 to 100 feet where the wetlands are, which is actually supposed to be swampy. That's the way wetlands are. So.
And I guess just to speak to Ms. Sherman, this is a gateway piece. This would be a legacy project for Enclave Holdings. The majority of our portfolio are historical properties that are on the historical registry that we have done interior renovations to. We love the look and feel of the historical sites and properties. And so this would be very consistent with newer projects that look historical. My house, I know this has nothing to do with this project, but is the old Pearson house. That is the old Weston home. That was a 1960s home. And that is 1 acre that could have easily been 3 different houses that were torn down. And we wanted to preserve it. So if that speaks to who we are in character as far as developers, we want to be consistent. And again, this is a gateway site, as you mentioned, and we want it to look right and feel right as well. So that is in our full intention, as well as leaving our footprint and legacy behind.
I sincerely appreciate that, and I also want to recognize outright that as a member of this community, you're that much more invested, and I am confident that that you will be able to come back, or I'm confident that there can be a solution. I am just personally a little uncomfortable with the unknowns at the moment, but I am one of a few on this board.
I think and we can have further discussion, or we can try to craft a motion based on what we heard from Shelley, what we heard from Mr. Calhoun. Or
Yeah, really torn on this one. There's a lot of things I like about it, some things I don't, you know. It is a special site, isn't it?
yeah, I've seen those trees for 25 years driving down Old Raleigh Road.
I love everything about it. If we can move Food Line out and put another one on the other side of it, I'd be all for it, to be quite honest. I mean, residential retail is walkable, and you have a restaurant downstairs or a coffee shop. I don't see the negatives, to be honest. Then again, I grew up in New York City, so to me, this is ideal.
5 stories is small.
Yeah, I mean, you can still throw a baseball on the top of that building, is where you're not going to do that everywhere else. But I get the aesthetics and it having to have a certain look. And if Shelley can work with the applicant to do that, I say we give them the opportunity to do that, and it goes to council, and then council says, all right, no, we don't like it, and you just kick back.
We are a recommending board, so I would just like to strongly recommend that we keep it, to do everything possible to keep it to 4 stories or less. And just make that a strong recommendation.
I like the position of doing more human scale and vertical stepping. I've done a lot of deck wraps in downtown Durham, probably more than any other consultant, and I'll tell you, if it's done right, it can look really good. But if it's done wrong, that's where we put our full faith in staff, and we've got the best staff in the triangle. So I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater here. I think this can be done right. And I was just looking at downtown Cary, because I feel like they get all the accolades, and they've got a 4-story right up on the street in East Chatham. So I'd love to see us just to get just a touch higher than them. I think we could do better than that.
I hope we don't get into the race of who can go higher. That's not where Apex needs to go.
We're already higher.
We are at the peak. Yes, we are. So we don't need to go any higher in building height. We already got them there.
I think if we're gonna make a recommendation, I'd like to see, to include something involving neighbor input. Again, I am concerned that even if we have this setback, that, what that looks like for neighbors.
I got a problem with that. I mean, how do you have somebody else say what you can do on your property?
I was trying to put something out there that was gonna get me to vote yes. But
I mean, he said there's a 100-foot buffer in between them. I mean, if there's a 100-foot buffer, what more can you ask them for other than 150?
I I am always for more neighbor involvement, not less, and so if we're making a recommendation, that would be my recommendation.
Jeff?
I hear the discussion about 4 stories and 5 stories. But wouldn't we be a little more concerned with the overall height of the building? Because if he comes in with 4 stories and each ceiling is 14 feet tall,
It's gonna be bigger.
or he comes in with 4 stories and they're 8 feet tall, then you just put a 5th story in the same platform height-wise that you would put a 4-story building in. And I know that's an important corner. But to some degree, we all need to be honest and say that intersection was doomed when Food Line Shopping Center went in.
That's right.
It's not attractive. It's not Salem Street. You know, it's going to be something commercial with a residential flair. And I was looking at the portfolio of what they have. And with all due respect, any building that I saw on there, say 1 or 2 that were some small 1-story, 2-story, I think it would look fantastic on that corner compared to what could go there.
Shelley, question for you. What is the maximum building height currently as zoned?
The existing PUD does not give doesn't give them a number. It gives us a number of stories. So the existing PUD is 4 stories on that particular parcel. Like Jeff alluded to, that could be 4 stories with 8-foot tall ceilings. That could be 4 stories with 12-foot tall ceilings that the PUD doesn't specify. We have difficulty assessing that once we get above a residential. So typically a 3-story residential, your maximum building height is 45 feet. That's because of the peak to the roof to some degree. And also because you have a crawl space and everything that may or may not take up a good chunk of it. And we measure from the ground, the finished grade next to the building, at the lowest point where it touches the building, up to the tallest point that's contiguous. I mean, we won't go from the north side to the south side and measure the tallest point on the south side if we're looking at starting on the north side kind of thing. But so I am not an architect and I am not 100% familiar with how much clearance you need to get in all of the utilities for a 1-story mixed, or for the first floor commercial of a mixed-use building. I would assume between what I've seen, and I can only tell you what I've seen, is between 10 and 15 feet. But that's kind of up to the architect and the applicant. I'm hesitant about giving you a number for what that would be because I'm not an expert on that. And that's not something that and unfortunately I haven't gone around and measured all the buildings that would be similar in the triangle. I think that we typically see roughly 45 to 50 for a 3-story building, but that's including a parapet wall to hide the mechanical stuff that nobody really wants to look at.
This one can go to 75, so potentially 25 foot above it because the maximum height was, if you take out stories, if we're going to delete stories and just go by height, the maximum building height is 75. So 25 foot above.
Could be.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm looking for a possible motion. Take a vote.
If it's for me, I would make a recommendation to deny it based upon the height and restrict the height to where the project was initially approved at the 4-story mark. And I know that there can be variance of height. That grade could also be raised, but I I don't see where increasing the density to offset the cost of property should be the reasoning of why we're going to go up higher.
So do you want to deny, or you just want to approve with a limit to 4 stories?
Well, we can't limit it to 4 stories.
Your recommendation will
Your-
go to council, so your recommendation will go to council that it be that remain at 4 stories, but that the other changes proposed are okay with you all. And then basically when it gets to council, they only can either accept a condition change from the applicant or they can deny it.
Okay, then in that case, then I would recommend approval, being that we limit the size to the 4 stories. And I would also like to see, I think we're all pretty consistent on seeing the retail on the lower level that wraps along Lower Duncan Road.
Okay, so I have a motion from Tim.
And where do you sit on neighbor engagement in that recommendation?
Well, it's already approved right now at 4 stories. So regardless of whether it gets approved tonight or somebody else comes along, previous council has approved it at 4 stories. So
And you're saying you want it at 4 stories?
I want to keep it at 4 stories. I don't want it to go any higher than what's already approved. And when the neighbors purchase, they can see what was automatically there. I think that's fair to them as well.
I have a motion from Tim to approve with the limitation to 4 stories and preference to keep retail on all the lower floors.
Correct.
If that motion is seconded, I'd like to hear from Curtis again. Was it correct in the statement that if it's all commercial or non-residential on the ground floor, that with 3 stories above, the numbers don't pencil out, you can't get to the 90 units?
Yeah, again, we don't have full architectural plans, so the 5th story allows for flexibility, and the Laura Duncan portion to be non-commercial allows for us to potentially limit it to 4 stories, as well as get the units out. Now, it could wrap a portion of the corner here, if it's limited. And so let's just say the restaurant goes to here, and the remainder of the building, it fits 3 or 4 more units down there.
Architecturally, you think you could keep it where it would look consistent, where it'd be really hard? I just don't, I don't want apartments.
The mix,
With a
yeah.
porch,
You're saying.
sitting on the
Sure.
first floor.
Yeah.
Sure.
Some laundry hanging out on the
Sure.
first floor balcony. That's
Well, there's also a safety concern having residential up along street frontage like that.
Right.
Most of them are set up off the street for
Mhm.
safety reasons,
Yeah.
and people walking by, not looking in windows and things like
Yeah.
that.
Right.
But, so you said that it's possible, you just don't know yet.
Yeah, we would just like the flexibility.
And
I mean, the more constrained it gets, and then we get into it, we may have to walk away, but
are there other, and this may be a Shelley question, are there other ways to there's the parking, change in parking requirements, could they further do a parking study and further restrict or limit the amount of parking required to provide more building to achieve the goal of lowering the building height?
It's definitely a possibility. That would be something that we could come back with if, say, that's something they came up with. What I can tell you that I've already discussed with the applicant is this reduction in parking to meet the current UDO standards. The UDO also has a table in it that we use for mixed-use buildings specifically, which means that basically instead of requiring 100% of the parking that would be required for each individual use, we have percentages based on when those uses would be most likely to be home, per se, be most likely to be full. So we go with that, and we fill out the building area and the parking calculation from the UDO, and we look at, okay, well, what is the largest number for weekday during the day, weekday during the evening, weekends, daytime, weekends, nighttime? When will we need the most parking? And we will be using that on this project. I've already worked it out with the applicant to kind of give him that calculator. We are also looking at, the UDO allows a 10% parking reduction on site because it is a mixed-use development and because it's part of a larger mixed-use development. And the applicant has approached the Vineyard Station shopping center owners about a shared parking agreement to try to offset that as well. And this is all with the intent of trying to limit this to a 4-story building. We've definitely looked at all of that. We can also work on that additionally moving forward. And if it works out that a parking study would work better and they could reduce the parking additionally, we can definitely come back to you with that. My understanding is the applicant has a fairly short turnaround from the current property owner. And so we've actually been working on this for the last 4 months together. It just got submitted in September, I think. I can't keep my months straight anymore. But so we have put a lot of thought into all this, and we will definitely bring back anything that needs to be addressed again. But
That would go to
we're,
council, not to us.
well, we would bring it back to you all as well. If they've proposed an additional zoning amendment to say, look, we're doing what you want, we're keeping it at 4 stories, but we need to do maybe a parking ratio of 1 1/4 spaces, kind of thing, and their parking study supports that, then it would be a full PUD amendment, just like this one, and it would come to you all, and you could have the opportunity to discuss it, and then it would go to council. So.
I think that is much more information. I understand that it may eventually come as a PUD amendment, but I think additional information you can take to council with the current draft that you have, I think could be helpful to the conversation.
I will definitely keep that in mind. Thank you. I can amend my staff report to include more of that.
So what do we need to do for Tim's motion?
So Tim, you have a motion to approve but limit to 4 stories, but you also mentioned retail all the way around. Would you take that piece off and just, as long as it, you know, I'm putting some faith in Shelley, I mean, she usually doesn't let us down, that architecturally it'll look okay if that's apartments. If that keeps it down to 4 stories, then the project goes, so.
Yeah, well, the current concern kind of comes back to like what Ryan had pointed out. I mean, if you're gonna have that first floor apartment, ground level,
Would you
kind of have a safety concern, and how's it gonna look?
Not great.
If I may, would you
I
be
think
willing to
we're
consider a
missing out on
condition?
a lot of commercial property right there. I think for retail, we could use that.
I don't know how this would work for building inspections because of building code, but would you be willing to consider a condition where the frontage along Laura Duncan, the part of the building that is up against Laura Duncan and Hunter Street would be non-residential, with the possibility that a few of the units on the back end of the building that face the parking lot might potentially be residential if needed by the applicant?
I think that would make sense.
That would, it seems like it would address the concerns about the road
Yep.
and the laundry on the first floor balconies.
I think that
Which
would
I like.
make sense.
Okay.
Well,
With that.
but, okay,
I
you have a
apologize.
business on Laura Duncan,
Mhm.
how do you get your product?
I understand that that could be an issue. And like I said, I'm not certain if that would even be something that building code would permit, but it might allow us to explore those
So, I
options.
mean, the probably run into, in my, where I'm looking at it is,
Mhm.
if I live on the backside, do I want to see a food service truck
Every day.
parked in front of my apartment 2 hours twice a week? Or, you know, if I have a hardware store there,
Mhm.
I get 9 deliveries a week. So you devalue that first floor apartment on the backside.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would second that. I would say devalue considerably, and I wonder if that doesn't even offset the cost of just doing retail and I feel like we're negating points that could offset some of the concerns we're trying to offset. Which comes back to my concern of, I think there's a lot of unknowns here.
Jim, you have a motion now. basically approve the project, limiting it to 4 stories. Yeah, go ahead, Mr.
I mean, there does seem to be a lot of confusion. I don't know if it needs to be as ambiguous as it is or constrained as it is, because on one hand, we have a concern that the price of the property should not affect the development of the property. But then we have concern about the value and devalue of certain apartment units on a floor. So do we care about value, or do we, I guess I'm confused as to, do we want to increase value? Do we want to decrease value? Sure.
So you might be addressing 2 different values at 2 different points.
Sure.
So they're both.
Yeah, I guess I would point you to Carpenter Village. That's another one that's got a lot of first floor units there. Downtown Raleigh has a lot of first floor units as well. So just something to consider.
All of our walk-up apartments have first floor units, every single one of them. Are there any along major thoroughfares? I'm sorry, I don't know if this is actually considered major thoroughfare, but are there any along a street like this? I can't think of any, so I'd love to. I'm not talking downtown Raleigh, because I know where they are in downtown.
Yeah, you can make it so that Laura Duncan, there's no access to the unit from the first floor. Yeah, with either a wall, a balcony wall, or some sort of decorative wall that's there.
I want to go back to Dan, you said that there absolutely are first floor apartments. Are there first floor apartments along Laura Duncan, Olive Chapel, another major road in town?
So we have walk-up, we have internal access apartments, the flats at 540 that were built very close to Reading Brook Crossing, the road that's right in front of it, and those are first floor, more than urban style apartment development.
But none of those were, like, that's not facing any of the major thoroughfares.
It's not a major, no, it's not a major thoroughfare, but I was trying to give an example of an urban one where the apartment complex is up close to the road and there's no parking in between the building and the road.
Yes, those exist, those accidents, those are down the road, they absolutely exist. My concern is that it would be.
So we have senior apartments on Laura Duncan Road, can't remember the name of them.
Reserve at Mills Farm. Yep.
We have apartments at Olive Chapel Road, near Kelly Road, I don't remember the names of the areas.
Yes.
We've got Meridian on 1010, just built, 1010 is a thoroughfare.
The ones behind Costco.
Yep.
Yeah, Meridian.
Yeah, it's Meridian.
Are those, see, I'm picturing all of these and none of them are on.
So Pine Plaza is actually a fairly busy road. That's this road here. Unfortunately, these are 2017 aerials, so it doesn't show you the actual buildings. But Meridian is right here, and these are first floor, these do have first floor units.
I'm going to disagree with the traffic on the road, but we don't have a traffic study and that's not relevant here. So.
Sure. Right here is where Reserve at Mills Farm is, and they're pretty close to the front, pretty close to Laura Duncan Road right here. They actually start like here-ish. Pine Plaza has this set of apartments that have been there for, gosh, forever.
I'm sorry, I'm going to try to bring us back to the motion that was made, because I need to understand what the motion is, because one motion I would vote in favor of, the other motion I wouldn't, so I want to understand the motion that's on the table.
All right, go back. Tim, your motion.
Yes, so the motion is to approve limiting building height to 4 stories, and then both on Laura Duncan and Hunter Street, facing all the retail on that side. I think that would be a good compromise for all.
I second that.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second.
So I
Deb?
just have a question, is it truly retail or is it commercial? Do you have office uses allowed on the first floor?
According to the PUD, they are, but,
It's not the same thing. Retail is not.
so it would either need to be non-residential.
Non-residential.
I'll still second that.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second. Any discussion before we have a vote?
Yeah, I don't have it.
Okay.
So I have conditions as proposed by applicant, except the height should be limited to 4 stories as currently allowed. And frontages along Hunter Street and
non-residential.
road should be non-residential land uses only. Is that okay?
Is that okay with you?
Yes.
Okay. Tina, that's good for your second? Okay. Any other discussion?
I would just like to add, I am cautiously excited about this project. I think that there are a lot of variables that we take view, I think addressing, there's some additional ones that I'm hoping that are gonna get addressed. But I think that, I hope that this works, because I think that, the applicant being here in town, gets the importance of what, of who we are and what we would like to see. I just hope we can get it all ironed out. So I'm putting faith in staff and council that we can do that.
Thanks, Tina. All right. So everybody, I think we know what we're voting on. So all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? So that motion passes unanimously. And if I think that is, we don't have any PUD amendments? Come on. Or UDO, I mean, UDO amendments. Yeah, okay. I need a motion.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Yeah, we got a motion from Reggie and a second from Tim. All those in favor? Aye. We're done.